Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to All Politics of Local America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Y'all know if it's Friday, y'all know it's time for All Politics of Local America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. So tonight we have a real important show, some things we're going to talk about, we're going to get into. Of course, I'm one of your hosts, Ed Riley. Uh, Zaid Muhammad is traveling, so he's moving about the country, and John is running a little late, but he will most certainly be with us. So tonight we have a real good show coming up at 6 o'clock. Well, it's 6 o'clock now. So coming up first, we're going to have a retired educator, Amanda Stafford. We're going to talk about her new book. And then at 6:30, we're going to have Reverend Conrad Tillard. We're going to come on and we'll talk about the politics of the day. And then, of course, at 7, we're going to have the vote, and we'll be talking with Chris Duran, TJ Whitaker, and a number of other folks going to come through. So we'll have a conversation. John will give you who all those people are. And then, of course, at 8 o'clock, we'll have a conversation about education, and we'll get into a discussion with a number of different people. Then at 8:30, we'll talk hip hop. So we're gonna get our guests on now, and we'll talk with Amanda Stafford. How you doing, Amanda? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. So,
Awesome.
John was talking with me earlier. He was telling me about your book, and the name of your book again,
Is Oneimus.
Onest.
Oneimus.
I can't even pronounce the word.
That's okay.
So why don't you just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can talk about your book.
Okay. I'm a retired educational administrator in the state of New Jersey. I worked in both private schools and public schools. And also, I worked for the New Jersey Department of Education, supervising school districts. I was involved when the state began taking over Jersey City, um, Patterson, and Newark. I worked in the northern unit, so I was involved in all of that intervention at that time.
And where? So you worked in the state. You didn't work in one particular city.
No, when I worked in the State Department, they divided it into um, the various counties. So there were three different sections: the north, the south, and the central. And I worked in the northern county, so
Okay.
that dealt with Hudson County, Bergen County, Warren, Sussex, Essex, um, two other counties. So 7 counties in the north
Okay.
was what was responsible for. I worked in the special education department. And then when the urban education department opened up, I transferred and I was in the urban education department and was involved with some of the early interventions with state takeover of Patterson, Newark, and Jersey City.
So you were around when Cammie Anderson was around.
No, I was prior to that.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
So so you had already retired at that point.
No, I hadn't retired. Was no longer working for the Department of Education. I was then working in public schools, Orange School District, which is in Essex County. And I went in as an assistant principal, and then I was a principal at 2 schools in Orange.
Did you know Principal Kafele when he was up there?
He was in East Orange. So you got 3 oranges in Essex County. You got East Orange, you got Orange, and you got West Orange.
Right.
So I was actually in Orange, and he was in East Orange.
Right.
So I was actually.
Wow. So what? Let's talk a little bit about your book. What brought you to write about this book?
Okay, I had seen something on MSNBC, and it was making reference to a book by Isabel Wilkerson, Cast, and it had mentioned an enslaved person named Oneimus, who is being credited with sharing the precursor that led to vaccinations. And this
Mm.
was on MSNBC in the height of the pandemic. And I've always been interested in sharing things with young people, particularly things that Africa and our African history. And I started doing research, and there was barely any research when I started. But because the pandemic lasted so long, a lot of things started surfacing about this enslaved person named Onesimus.
Mhm.
In fact, they were able to locate the diary of the slave owner, and a lot of pertinent stuff was documented from that diary. So it's a fascinating story because he was a highly intelligent person. And I have found that many of our young people believe what has been put out there, that we came over uh, on the slave ship without any skills, with very little knowledge. We were savages, and this just was not true. So my book is to share with young people that this is not accurate information, and to give them some solid evidence. He has been accredited again with presenting or sharing the precursor for vaccinations. He saved a lot of lives in Boston when smallpox was evident there in the 1700s, and he's considered one of the most prestigious Bostonians of all times. So, again, my hope is to go into school districts, um, to just open the door with this book, but to share with young people many unsung heroes that they don't know about. They know about Harriet Tubman, they know about Martin Luther King, all the traditional ones, but I want to share with them ones that are not talked about, ones that are not known, and particularly ones that came over as slaves and did some phenomenal things in the skills that they brought over with them.
And now now this book was published during the pandemic.
It was published in actually it was published in February of 2023, but I was writing it during the pandemic. I was researching and gathering information about it.
Now, and what particular vaccinations was he responsible for?
Well, he wasn't, this was in the 1700s, so there was not vaccinations, but he introduced an African medicinal procedure called variolation. That was the first. Then it progressed to inoculations.
Can you
Then it
can you
progressed to
can you explain
vaccinations. Hmm?
what is that?
He introduced the variolation was when you would open up somebody's skin and you would take pus from an infected person and you would put it into a non-infected person to prevent them from getting smallpox. And this was very controversial at the time that he was doing it. At the time that he shared it, and his owner and a doctor in Boston were using it. They were afraid that this enslaved person shared something that was going to kill many white people in Boston. And
And
they proved that no, it was actually saving people from smallpox.
again, that particular procedure was called
Variolation.
variolation. Okay.
Variolation, yes.
And then after variolation, he introduced.
Well, after that, someone improved on it, and then inoculations came into play. But the precursor, that's the precursor, the variolation.
Right.
Okay, and that was an African medicinal procedure that was used for a long time in Africa. So
And so,
again, it is the precursor for inoculations and then vaccinations.
and so we get to this particular point where we are now. Does he get credit for any of that
Sure,
work?
sure. If you look in Isabel Wilkerson's book, The Cast, or right now you can just Google his name, Oneimus. It spells Onesimus. There is a lot of information out there about him at this time. But again, at the beginning of the pandemic, you would Google, you wouldn't find anything.
Wow, really?
Okay, right.
And why
But
is that?
again, because the pandemic lasted so long, this sparked interest in that.
Okay.
And a lot of things have been written about him since the pandemic.
And I would assume that your book contributed to that.
My book was just published in
23.
February of 2023. But the interest was just there because this pandemic was lasting so long, and people were backing up to figure out where vaccinations came from and who introduced a precursor to it.
Now, so his variolation, which was the precursor to the inoculation. Now,
Yes.
let me ask this question. So, this particular, I don't know if I want to call it technology or medicine, was not available. So, what was it that and I guess we want to say probably the colonialists or the ancestors at the slave masters at that time, what were they using?
People were dying in large numbers from smallpox.
Wow.
Okay, and he's being credited with sharing that medicinal procedure that saved thousands of lives, tens of thousands of lives.
So what can you tell us about him? Like what was his background? What country did he come from?
Okay. It is believed that he came from Ghana.
Okay.
We know the ship that he came on. It was called the give me a minute. The Eflon ship. He was purchased by a Puritan congregation for their minister, Cotton Mather, whose father just happened to be one of the founders of Yale University. I didn't put that in my book because I didn't want the focus taken off Oneimus.
Right.
But I'm just sharing that with you. But again, he was purchased and given as a gift to this Puritan minister. The minister taught him to read and write. In his diary, he countless times mentions how bright and intelligent he was. He was upset with him, the minister, because he taught him to read and write so that he could read the Bible and accept Christianity, and he declined to do so. And so the minister was upset about that. Because of that, he allowed him to work outside of the home after he finished his slave duties. And he was able to earn enough money to purchase another slave to replace him. So he got his freedom. He was able to get his freedom by replacing himself with money that he had earned.
Right.
He was married. He had children. And that's a fascinating story in my opinion.
Now let me ask you, how old was he when they brought him to America? How old was he?
They don't there was no information to really, document how old he was.
And so the slave master taught him how to read. So did he ever go to school, or he was
No,
self-taught?
no, he was taught by the slave owner to read and write, and he was considered highly intelligent.
So he actually taught himself to actually do the type of procedure with do variolation that he was doing. He actually taught himself that.
Well, this was a procedure that was used extensively in Africa.
Okay.
In fact, they interviewed slaves other than him that had come over on the boats to document how they weren't getting smallpox. And there were others that shared that as well, but him sharing it with Cotton Mather, his slave owner, and the slave owner taking it further, um, is what's documented in the diary.
And so and how long was he on that plantation before he got his freedom? Do we know that?
I don't believe he was on a plantation. He was one of the slaves that was owned by the Puritan minister.
So was it a church?
It was a church.
Okay.
Yes, yes, it was a church.
And so he purchased him basically to be a worker.
He didn't purchase him. The congregation purchased him as a gift and gave him to the Puritan minister.
And what was his function to be?
He was a slave. I mean, he did
He was
whatever he
supposed to
was.
be there to be the worker, and
Yeah, he was a worker. He did whatever he was told to do. But Cotton Mather, the Puritan minister, realized how bright and intelligent he was. And he would finish his work, and then he'd go out and work in the community. He allowed him to go out and work other places and earn money.
and what did he do in the community? Do we know?
I believe carpentry, a variety of things.
And these were all the skills he came with when they brought him here from Africa, from Ghana.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And so that his particular skills with that variolation to inoculation is the precursor to today's
Vaccinations.
what people are using today
Yes,
to actually cure diseases like what we just came through with COVID-19.
absolutely.
And so let me I guess from my standpoint, I would ask, is the family, does he have family that's still alive in America at this point? Any family member, any lineage?
I have not seen any research documenting that. Again, the interest in him is relatively new, and it's just because of the pandemic
Right.
and people moving backwards to find out what contributed to us learning how to do vaccinations. Or also in my book, since the pandemic lasted so long and we didn't expect it to last as long as it did, I include things, critical things that happened during that time, so that I can discuss that with kids, like all churches being shut down, kids having to learn via
Remotely.
remotely, virtual learning, um, parks being closed. And I had a phenomenal designer to do the pictures for it. Her name is Anque, and she's from the Newark, Essex County area, Yvonne Anque. And so we got some really graphic pictures, pictures of kids wearing masks, so that in the future kids can look back at this and see what was going on during the pandemic. Toilet paper and paper towels being off all the shelves and um, supermarkets, hand sanitizer, which we weren't using to the extent that we use it now.
Right.
Families spending more time together because they had nothing to do but be home with each other. And also, it amazed me the historical events that happened during the pandemic as well. For instance, the Derek Chauvin um, incident, and George Floyd being murdered, and that
Right.
being caught by a young teenager who didn't know the ramifications of what she was doing. She was just filming.
Right.
All right. The June 10th national holiday, the Black Lives Matter slogan, the historical events like the voting act that has not been passed yet that we're hoping will be passed. So again, all of these things happened during the pandemic. Onesimus was not involved in that, but because the story is about him and about vaccinations, I included things that were going on during the pandemic so that our youngsters will know and understand and can discuss those kinds of things.
What about, all of the deaths that had taken place from them not really knowing this particular country, not really knowing exactly what COVID was, right? Because I lost some friends early on, of course they say they had COVID, but remember nobody really knew what it was at that very moment, and folks were actually pretty scared at that time.
Mm.
Do you talk about that at all in the book?
It's not in the book, but certainly my intent is to go into school districts. This is just to open the door, and I intend to have many discussions with young people, and that certainly will be one of them. Now, I'm a person personally that was not never going to take the vaccination,
Okay,
the vaccine. I
right.
never took a flu shot. I do a lot of holistic stuff. But when some family members who were very close to me and friends that were close to me got COVID and were in the hospital almost dying, I decided to take the vaccine. I mean, that's something that a personal thing that I will share with young people. That was just a personal decision of mine. But I know that there are a lot of other people who haven't taken it, and we can discuss that. Who in your family has taken the vaccine? Why not? How do you feel about it? This book again will open the door for some deep discussions with young people about vaccinations in general.
You also know that, yeah, and that's great, because as you know, folks were being discriminated against who did not take the vaccine. Remember, there were certain places you couldn't go, right?
Yes.
Even when you go to when you went to the doctor would say, "Did you have the vaccination? Did you have your booster shot?" It
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
almost as though I can
You
remember.
were forced
Yeah,
almost.
yeah, absolutely. Because I can
Yes.
remember going in for a procedure, and I remember, the doctor saying before you come in for the procedure, you've got to have this vaccination.
Hmm.
And I started thinking to myself. By the way, Donna, welcome to the show. Donna
Hi.
Williams is one of our co-hosts,
Oh,
and
hi, Donna.
you know, and um, and I started thinking about, because the Nation of Islam, none of their members took the vaccination. And
Okay.
as you know, you couldn't get on planes, you couldn't get on trains, right? You couldn't go in certain facilities unless you had
Restaurants, a lot of stuff.
yeah, you had to
Hmm.
prove that you had your vaccination. So we
Hmm.
were actually being discriminated against, those who didn't take it. And like you, it wasn't until some of my friends had started getting sick, like Donna, one of them, that I actually thought about it and said, wow, I guess I need to take this, because at that very moment I became sort of, I don't want to use the word scared. I became a little nervous about catching the virus myself. and not
Hmm.
able to, survive it. So, that is an interesting conversation, how you were almost forced in this country to take that vaccination.
And
I would say fearful on my part.
and what I would say, as Ms. Stafford, as an educator, if the opportunity arises for you to kind of teach in retrospect, because one of the things this was not like the flu shot. You take it from the actual flu and
Hmm.
then you create the flu shot. This is not how that vaccine was created. So
Hmm.
that's something even, to talk about, once you get a little more data and study to even talk about the comparison of doing that. But also, for me, um, I had it and I was in the hospital for 10 days and was very, very, and if I have to tell my own story, was at death's door. But I did not, and I'm here to talk about it today. And after coming out the hospital and getting better. And then once the shot came out, because I had it, we shut down around May 17th. I was in the hospital on April 10th. So I had it in the very early stages. um I was without hesitation taking it, and standing up and asking all of my loved ones and friends to take it as well, based on my personal experience. But I know one of my doctors, he did not take it, and he explained to me why. But he said his mother, he did, but he just needed to see, he wanted, as a doctor, he wanted to see more um study on it. So he was flexible enough to say that, my mother, she's in that age where, I don't want to take a chance, so I want her to have it. But for me, he didn't get sick or anything, so he wanted to see more data on it. So I still think that it was interesting. But I can tell you one story. I remember going to the doctors after they start letting people back in slowly, and
Hmm.
how excited, not excited, but shocked or whatever emotion you would want to use. But when a nurse, because when you first went back, doctors had protocol to come into their office. My doctor's protocol was they would give you the blood test and see. And the nurse, when she gave me the blood test, she seen that I had antibodies, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you got antibodies," which means that she had not seen a lot of people with antibodies. So it's interesting. I think we'll be studying it for a long time and talking about it and see what the outcomes,
Hmm.
are really, and then begin, because there's still different forms of it coming out. Some people are well, look, Whoopi, The View just came back on for the new season, and Whoopi's at home right now, convalescing, and she's in her room. She can't come out. She, by doctor's orders, because she has COVID again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Wow.
so that's another thing, right? When you think about that, Amanda, people had to literally stay in their rooms, right?
Yes, the quarantines. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, couldn't come out, right? You had to have everything. Boy, I mean, this was early on in this process, which was like, I don't. Well, I know for my, I mean, for my generation, we had never seen nothing like that, right?
Never. Never. It was amazing. I'm still in my mind wrapping things around, driving down 22 and everything is shut down and closed like we're in a ghost
Right.
world or whatever. Yeah, our kids need to, remember this, know about it, and it's not over yet.
Right.
That's the thing. It's not over yet. Some of this is still lingering, and we need to talk about what kind of things we can continue to do to protect ourselves.
Mhm.
And what they claim is that it's going to be with us just like the flu, right?
That's
So
what they're claiming. Time will tell.
so just like the flu, we need to have this vaccination, right, every year.
Well, I
Or
don't, I don't, I don't want to do that. I've
me
never
either.
had a flu shot. I've still
Me
never
either.
had a flu shot. But I mean, we have to discuss things and figure out how to move forward with this because has different. It has certainly changed many things the way we live right now.
So again, if we were to talk about your book, what we started talking about, Donna, is of course her book. And what's the name of your book again, Amanda?
Onesimus.
And it talks about this brother who came from Ghana, who actually was the one who created and this whole vaccination, this journey going from the variolation to inoculation and getting to where we are today. I mean,
Yes,
and that opens up a whole conversation for young people to begin to understand. When Africans came here, they came here with certain skills.
and knowledge.
Yeah,
Mm.
Yeah.
that of course, that was not foreign to them because of where they came from, right? However, when we came to America, because we were robbed of our knowledge, our language, our heritage, and our culture, right? These people took what was ours and what was
Mhm.
not us and began to claim it as their own,
Mhm.
right? And so, and the beauty of, I think, that this book, she's right, it opens up an entire world to young people, right,
Yes.
to
Because
begin.
only recently, since the pandemic, has this enslaved person been given credit for sharing that African medicinal procedure. Prior to that, the doctor who partnered with the slave owner, they were getting credit for it all. And it did not come from him, from them, either of them. It
That's where I
was,
was going.
it was taken from Onesimus.
Mm.
And
That's what
it's clearly in the slave owner's diary, his personal diary. He documents that.
Mm.
that's where I was going when I said that. Does he have any family lineage? Does he have any relatives alive today? Because my I begin to think, well, what kind of monetary benefits
Hmm.
are available to his
To
family.
them. Yeah.
Was his procedure. That's what he created, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so there are people who were taking credit for that, and everything in America could be patent. Everything is being sold.
Hmm.
Everybody the money on everything. If that belonged to that brother, does he have family alive? Because that's just like we learned recently about a particular sister whose genes they used, right?
Yes.
To
And
make
her family recently got compensated.
oh, they
I'm
did get
following you.
compensated.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought they didn't get compensated.
No, they recently got compensated.
Oh, that is
Yes.
yeah,
Hmm. and
yeah,
and that would be something for me to springboard and share with young people too, because as I said, when I go into the schools, this is just going to open the door, and I'm going to share with them about other unsung African American heroes. She's one that they should know about,
right.
and they should know that she finally got compensated after
Yeah,
all of these decades.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Because they're still using her gene to this day.
That's a fascinating story. Maybe that'll be my second book.
Are, are we talking about Henrietta?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Which is absolutely amazing.
it is.
And
And
and I just learned about that on the show. I guess what, maybe 4 or 5 shows ago, where somebody brought that up to us, and I was like, that is absolutely amazing.
It
I mean,
is. It's
and
unbelievable.
right.
yeah, and,
Hmm.
and they did that without her knowledge, which
Yes.
was incredible.
Mm.
And also that my father and his brothers they had all of him and his siblings had full blown sickle cell, and they all um eventually died because it affected some, like my father, it was his kidneys, affected his brother, it was his eyesight, and his younger brother, he was much younger, he died in his like 20s. But I remember, having in early in the 20 early in 2000, having the opportunity to go to Africa, and the opportunity came like somebody, like, you want to go, you got to get ready, and and I'm reading, what everybody else would read, what you would need to do if you were going to an African country. And my in my town, my pharmacist is from Nigeria. He's like, Donna, and he laughed at me. You have everything you need in your body. You're from, your ancestors are from there. You don't need what a European would need. And and it made me stop and think. And he's like, you would just need the I needed the medicine, for malaria,
Mm,
and and the flu shot. But
okay.
they have like a list of 20 things. But when you look at it, and if I were living, back in Africa, or the Caribbean and everything, that though that the sickle cell would benefit my body because it would protect me. But
Wow.
it's just how we have to understand, that when you're here, we're taught one way, but we have to understand that our bodies are based on our you know our genes, and and where we come from and everything. But when he said that, he just laughed, and like, and it was really a thinking moment, that I had everything almost that I needed, to make that trip.
What's interesting about that is that if that be the case, that would explain, why in this particular climate, why so many black people develop high blood pressure, diabetes, because this climate is not really, conducive, to our genetic makeup. So for that brother to say that to you, that's interesting to say that
Hmm.
you have, everything you need to actually travel, to the continent, in
Hmm.
your body already because of that African blood that's in you. That's
Hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So I
go
know
ahead.
we have our guest on, and so there was some real interesting kind of traffic pattern in Newark. So just in terms of getting on, I know Reverend Tillard is on, so I know that we're wrapping up this segment and getting ready to get into the next one. But this was a good segment. This was really
yeah,
like
Mhm.
excellent,
it was nice. It was excellent.
excellent.
Great.
And Miss Stafford, we always ask a question. This is a hip hop radio show. And so
Hmm.
while we sit here and talk about current events and what's going on in politics, we also ask the question, what hip hop artists are you listening to, individual or group, that when you have to go do your work, right, whether you're writing, talking, whatever it is that you need to inspire you, is there a hip hop artist or group that you're listening to?
Not one in particular. Not one in particular, but
Is it you
any
got
that are sharing positive information, positive vibes.
okay?
Okay.
All right, well, we'll take
I
that. Well,
like
thank you. It's positivity. That's what you want.
I
Positivity,
like
yes.
Okay, all
Do you
right.
have one that you want to recommend to me?
that.
Do I have one?
Yeah,
I
one or
love
two. Yeah.
I love KRS-One,
Okay.
and I love Queen Latifah. So you
Okay.
know,
Okay.
Right. Well, and thank you so much.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
thank you. Appreciated you
okay,
and enjoyed that conversation immensely. I've learned a lot tonight. Thank you,
and
Yeah,
look forward to seeing you
Okay.
again.
and good luck
absolutely.
with the book.
All righty. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take
Great.
care.
Goodbye. All right.
Hey, Conrad, how are you, man?
Good evening. How's
Hey, my
everybody?
fave,
Good to see you
Conrad.
all this evening.
Great seeing you
Yes.
too, man. Great seeing you too. So,
Peace, Conrad.
Brother
That,
Ed,
what's
Sister
going on, man?
that,
Donna.
that gray hair is becoming
And,
grayer, brother.
Yeah. That wisdom, that
Well,
from
listen,
wisdom.
gray to
well, listen,
white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Go
And
have a listen.
You
I
see that
I
wisdom,
don't use
Jonathan?
shoe
You better.
polish. So,
That's right. Letting
as I
Jonathan know. You see that? You better be ready for
as I
him.
always say, you either gonna lose it or it's gonna turn white. Either way.
That's
Right.
right. One way or
Right,
the other.
right, right.
I still got a little
The,
black in
the
here. So,
losing
Yeah,
one. Got
okay.
my
All
shiny,
right.
got my shiny head on. Got my
I
shine
got a
going.
little black in my
yeah, a
mustache.
little
That's
black
it.
up here.
That is it.
You know what I do like with our skin? It seems like something happens that as as um we become gray. It's something our skin. It's like the tone. It just complements our skin tone and everything. I like to see, and sometimes we see women they gray or men as well gray
Mm-hmm.
really early, but it's
Oh yeah.
almost like a gold like a
Mm-hmm.
golden tone, like a shine that
Oh yeah.
happens in the
Yeah.
skin.
Yeah.
So Conrad, talk to me,
Yes,
man.
sir.
What's going on? What is it that you want to talk about tonight?
Well, I don't have any particular agenda tonight. I mean, there's a lot obviously going on, but I'm pretty open. I'm open to
Well,
Well,
what is it?
I'd be
you
interested
Yeah.
had
if you think about Cornel West, my brother.
okay.
His run for the presidency.
Yeah,
Well, I think it's interesting.
because you know what people are calling them.
What?
Wow,
Yeah,
people
and
calling him names?
I think that is, I hate when people take that position that somebody is a
Mhm.
spoiler, if
There you
that's what
go.
you mean.
Yep,
Some people
yep.
are saying
That's
that,
it.
but people said that Reverend Jesse Jackson was a spoiler in
Mhm.
1984 and 88. Said he had no chance of winning. He was just going to ensure Reagan's reelection, but he had to run to raise issues, important issues, mind
Right,
you. And
right.
I would say that much of the Democratic Party's platform today can be heard in that 1984 speech of Reverend
Mhm.
Jesse Jackson at the San Francisco Convention. So I don't say that. I mean, sometimes people do. Sometimes it's an ego trip, and
Mm.
sometimes you can't figure out what issues people are raising. Cornel West is a leftist. I would imagine to him, based on what he's saying, he doesn't feel the Democrat or Republican Party uh, can meet the needs of blacks. I mean, I've been pushing a 70-30 plan. There's some
Mhm.
people that will call me a spoiler, but I just think that in this political season, it's kind of bankrupt to say to people, don't participate in the process, don't exercise your constitutional right to run because our candidate is so weak that if you run, you may take 2% of the vote from him, and that may be enough for him to lose. I just find that an intellectually bankrupt argument to make to someone who cares a lot about issues. And I may disagree with
Mhm.
Dr. West, but I do know that he cares a
Mhm.
lot passionately about his issues. So that's my initial response to that.
And telling people not to participate,
Mhm.
um, we've been talking a lot about how important it is we have to
Mhm.
begin to stimulate our community, engage our
Mhm.
community and get back to the basics. I know at a meeting in Pop and we were talking about um the radio shows and how
Mhm.
WBAI and how we have to make sure that they stay alive, how we've lost a, a, a a lot of our black radio. We lost black media across the board, and how important it was. And I believe when they were discussing as they were preparing um, to go to Washington last weekend,
Mhm.
and they were talking about when that march happened in Washington. One of the key ways that they were able to get the word out was black media.
Mhm.
And, like
Yeah.
using, black media to, get this word here almost to to what they used to say that our ancestors did in the fields when they were singing those songs, and it was a way of communication. So we have to get back to being engaged and learning how to communicate and participate and showing up 100%. Because if we don't, things are just rolling back at a at a they're rolling back. So to see how long it took for things to come and to see how quick they're being undone is amazing.
Well, yeah, the history of the talking drum in our community. Every you have to have the means of communication, and on the plantation, when we were cut off from our kith and kin, and we were sort of spread out diasporically on these different plantations, it was the drum. It was our way of communicating, and throughout the history of our movement. The radio has played, the television, black media, from the early black publications, Crisis Magazine, even prior to that, during the time of the abolitionists, the North Star, and
Mhm.
even in the Civil Rights Movement, in Birmingham, the Children's March, the role the radio played, and I know in the 80s and 90s, whether it was whatever we were organizing, were it not for blessed WBLS, WLIB, and WWRL, it was very hard to communicate with the community, but so much easier when we had Black Press, Amsterdam News, etc. So it's important. It's crucial. But in terms of rolling back, I see it a little differently, in the sense that as African Americans, we just have to realize that, you know, it's we live in a political environment that you have to be ever vigilant. And I think a lot of times with Black folks, once something is established, we think it's once it becomes law, we think it will be law forever. And that's why we have to be vigilant. That's
Mhm.
why we see Jewish organizations and average Blacks say, "Well, what are they still fighting for? I mean,
Mhm.
they're in a strong economic position. Why are they still raising hell?" But they remember when they were not, and they intend to make sure that they're not in that position again. And that's the way we have to be.
That's right. And to continue to teach and to
Yeah.
to hear to hear a person in
Mhm.
their 40s or 50s say they're not gonna vote because they don't like somebody. I'm like, what's liking them got to do with it?
Yeah.
It's
Right. Right.
it's
No, you're right. But
it's a
see, that's why I say, I hear all of our civil rights organizations talk about voter suppression. I'm like, what suppression are you referring to? The apathy that exists in Newark and East Orange and Irving and Hillside. I mean, there's, in Brooklyn and the Bronx. So, that is a form of voter suppression. When people sit up and say, "I'm not going to vote because I don't like somebody," or
Right.
because they're throwing up, making it rain in a club somewhere, or, that's a form of, that's the voter suppression we need to be concerned about. Of course, we do need to be concerned about other forms of voter
hmm
suppression. It's just that with my frustration with Black people over 40 years is that if you put a boogeyman white man in front of us that's supposed to be doing something to us, we get all riled up. But we can't. It's preferable. It's more desirable. It's more exciting, I guess, to fight against somebody than to build up. And
hmm
that has
And,
been my frustration. That's why early in my career, I joined the Nation, because I don't want to spend my life protesting against things. I don't want to spend my life talking about uh, cops killing us. I want to work with brothers so they stop killing each other. I want to work in our community. I don't want to complain about store owners. I want to help build stores that we can patronize. And I think that's the part that we have to, as a people, it's basic, but it's something we have an aversion to that.
And I don't disagree with the organizing thing. I think that there's like the boogeyman. There's also the positive thing that Obama did when he ran. Like the way he ran was just to inspire people to come out and vote, right? But I think that both of them, like inspiring for a special occasion, which Obama was really, really good at doing, and organizing like block by block in a way that was, studied afterwards, right? I think that's all good. But I think right now, because of the apathy, because of where we are, and that most of us are just ignorant of politics and ignorant of a lot of things that are going on, I like to shake things up. I've been advocating for compulsory voting, like as in, compulsory voting, especially at a local level. If it happens in Newark, in Patterson, and in Camden, compulsory voting would literally shake up the entire United States, or at least the state. And by compulsory, I'm not saying go to jail for it. I'm saying compulsory voting where there's mandatory voter education or a small fine. You have a choice, right? You're either a fine or you watch a video about civics. Yeah. I think that if it's done in that way, there's no downside. Most of the time when people talk about compulsory voting, they're like, hey, we don't want the police involved. And of course not. That's crazy. But if compulsory voting were structured so that it's all about just getting people out to vote, a small fine, or if you don't want to pay the small fine, can't pay the whole small fine, watch a video that educates specifically about what the office is about, what the office does. Because I think that most people don't even know that when they're voting, they're telling where they want their tax dollars to go. And when people are like, oh no, I don't want compulsory voting, we are totally okay with compulsory taxation. No problem. I mean, people are like, oh, taxation, we understand when they take your property, but when they determine how to spend your property, they're like, you don't have to be involved in that. No, right? Because the private organizations that run that stuff kind of want you not to be involved when they're talking about how to spend your money. Most people don't even know that's what politics is about.
Right.
Like when I break that down to kids and adults, they're like, no, they've already decided to take your money. Voting is only you're having a say in what they do with it.
Conrad, let me ask you a question. Do we have compulsory? I just want to ask you a question, Conrad. Do we have compulsory voter registration? Because don't they make you register when you join the military?
Now that I don't know. I know that when you register to vote, or I mean, when you get a driver's license, or you go down to the Board of Motor Vehicles for ID, they give you the option. And I would be, I'm sorry, Brother John, I agree with you on everything, but the compulsory, as you know, I'm very skeptical of progressives that want to make things mandatory to make things better. In other words, I think
taxes are mandatory.
You know, Mobutu used to get 100% of the vote after election, so that was basically compulsory voting. The Taliban got 100%. They used to brag that they got 100% of the vote, and they had people have a purple piece of the purple dye on their fingers to prove they voted. In a free society, you don't make things compulsory. In other words,
well, you make taxing compulsory.
Well, but taxes are different.
Like,
but let me say this:
they're the same thing.
But it's wrong to say people don't have a problem with taxes, because most people don't even file taxes, and most people don't pay taxes except through sales tax and consumer taxes. That's the thing. So
we make
a lot of people
compulsory. You go to jail without it. Watching a video or a small fine, I think that no, is worse than what people actually is.
Why do you want to? Why would you want to make? In other words, if you understand the concept of a free society, why would you want to take something that's a sacred right to vote? I can understand you wanting to.
Property is a sacred right.
Yeah, but you got to do. Okay, so I'm a pastor, so I want to make, as it was in old Europe, it compulsory that people go to church.
They're totally different things.
No, it's not two different things. It's only two different things because you
say related to taxes.
No,
right?
No.
Taxes are compulsory but we're hoodwinking people. We are tricking people and we're preying on their ignorance. And we're doing nothing to deal with it.
Who's preying on their ignorance?
Politicians who don't really want people to vote. Most
well, let me ask you this question.
Only want their people to vote. So
let me ask you this
everything
question.
about it
I
is
agree.
private people come out. They want their people to vote.
And that's the way. And I don't think Ras Baraka is over in the Republican district doing get out to vote over there. So you're right. That's the way politics works. But again, in a free society, and let me tell you something. You have
to tell me what makes it not free in comparing to taxes.
Because in a free society, Jonathan, people have the right. The right to vote is a sacred right. But if you don't value it, and if you don't exercise your franchise, then you have the right to do that. Just as you have the right to be apathetic. And you can't criminalize. You have the right to have a high credit card balance.
You can vote for
criminalize those things. Otherwise, we might as well go back to medieval Europe.
In compulsory voting, you could vote for an expletive. You could write in anything you want. It is just saying you have to say something because we have obligations. I think the way you're even looking at freedom is wrong, right? I think that's part of the problem. There are rights and
you don't have the right to determine.
We got rights. Every right comes with a corresponding responsibility. And just like we pay taxes, right? We have a right to live in a country, but we have an obligation to pay taxes. We also understand, and why? Because if we don't pay taxes, society will be hurt. If we don't vote, apathy destroys democracies, right?
Well, let me ask you this question.
We in trouble, man.
Who determines?
And no one has a solution.
My only issue is who determines what kinds of things are compulsory. In other words, I don't feel comfortable that, in other words, for some people.
There are a whole lot of things. I think we need to.
Are we going to make marriage compulsory? Because the statistics say that it hurts the society when people don't marry and have children in two-parent households. You can't.
I think those are crazy
go down that road,
in comparison to compulsory voting, right?
Once you
marriage is
it's always different because it's a different value for you. This is what a free society means.
Voting
you
isn't
can't
just
be the arbitrator of what's different. If I threw 100 things at you would always say that's different. It doesn't. Society doesn't revolve around what you think is important. That's what a free society means.
Tying into taxes, we both agree there's a problem. Only one of us has a solution, right?
Who has the solution? Who has the solution?
Compulsory voting is at least a step in that right direction. That is a solution.
Just
tell people to vote.
We don't even have compulsory taxes.
We have compulsory education.
No, we don't. You only pay taxes.
You have to go to school till you're 16.
No, that's not true because in this society today, parents have the right to homeschool. So
you have to. There are standards for
only in totalitarian governments do people talk about compulsory things.
There's compulsory schooling. There's compulsory taxation.
No.
I'm just saying, you got to tell me why compulsory voting is worse than compulsory taxation. You can't.
Well, first of all, again, I don't like anything compulsory. Okay.
Taxes is.
No, they're not. Because if you don't make money, if you don't have a job, you don't have to pay taxes. You only pay taxes on the income. You only pay taxes on the income that you make. Most people don't. Actually, most people in the U.S. don't even pay taxes. That's why it's a bankrupt argument
every year. You got to fill out a form.
No, that's not true. If you don't make money, you don't have to file taxes. You have no job. And most people pay taxes through their sales tax, through their consumer taxes. So the point is, I think if you think about it, you don't want anything to be compulsory because once
the word sounds
no longer in a free society. You might as well be under Papa Doc.
I think that you're not recognizing that every law that we have is compulsory. We have laws. That means it's compulsory. That's why the argument against voting, it has no downside because we already have laws. We exist. Every law is compulsory. If you don't follow a law, there's something. We have tons and hundreds of laws. We got traffic laws. We don't say that for anything else. We don't say that for.
I gotta get my
one second.
I gotta get my computer cord. Wait 1 second.
1 second. He's about to die.
I gotta get my computer cord. 1 second.
Laws. We have all kinds of laws, and we just say, hey, we have laws that you need to educate yourself. You need to educate your kids.
And I think Reverend Conrad is Jonathan's hype man because he just.
But Jonathan is a debate instructor. But let me say this. Let me say this. In the early history of this country, there were some folks who came here because they lived in on a continent where there was compulsory belief, compulsory church attendance, compulsory obeisance to a sovereign ruler. And they came to the United States because they wanted freedom of religion, they wanted freedom of association, freedom of the press, and freedom of speech. All of these things are in the Bill of Rights. And I think that—
And they had laws that made certain things compulsory.
Two things have happened.
You know who'd be mad? Conrad, do you know who'd be most mad if Newark, Patterson, Camden, if black areas had compulsory voting? You know who'd be most pissed at that?
Who is that?
Racist white people.
Because here's my point. No. See, there you done found the boogeyman. Wait. Why can't black people?
If there was compulsory voting,
let me ask you a question.
Compulsory voting,
why can't black
change
people
power dynamics in the state?
Why aren't black people? Why aren't black people in Newark and Patterson and Jersey City competent enough to be taught the importance of voting? No. Let me finish this point.
Ignorance is nationwide.
Let me finish this point. Why do we need to make something? You know, you can get rid of
voting
drugs.
Is not just individual.
You know, you can get rid of crime and drugs. Mobutu was very good at that. When Ali fight came into Zaire in 74, you know what he did? You know what he did?
Killed off of compulsory voting.
Let me
people. He was a killer. He's not killing.
Again, Jonathan is see. Here's the thing.
A lot more people are jailed for not paying taxes.
Let me just break this down for you, brother Jonathan. It used to be that the purists and absolutists were the conservative. Let me finish.
You got to deal with an argument, man.
It used to be that it used to be that the purists and the absolutists were the more conservative religious fundamentalists. They said that if you don't go to church, you're going to hell. If you don't believe,
and in jail, and they kill people.
Believe this way, you're going to hell. Let me finish. Let me finish. Okay. If you're straight, you're going to hell. Gay, you're going to hell. They used to say if you don't wear a clean shirt and tie, and a clean shave and a close haircut.
And when they got laws, they
now today we become a lot more religiously tolerant. Most people are involved in interfaith relationships, ecumenical. Where the extremism today is on the left. It's people.
That's not extremism.
People want to tell you. People want to tell you that you have to do this.
So
the climate, the world is being destroyed. You can't drive a gas
That's you
car.
right now.
No,
you're like,
you. I'm
oh
not
my
saying
God,
that
I
at
gotta
all.
watch a video. That's totalitarianism. That's you, man. You're
I'm simply saying that if a person doesn't want to be bothered with the political process, it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing. But I would not want to live in a country where at a certain point the soldiers go and knock on people's door and make them go vote.
They shoot people. Like watching a video about what your government.
Well, how are you going to enforce that, John?
Not shooting you.
How are you going to enforce that? I mean, how would you enforce that?
Minor fine.
When you make something compulsory, you got to be willing to enforce
it. And in terms of that, we're talking. I mean, you can. It literally is just about getting more people. 100% of the people.
Yeah, but you can't.
Going to vote.
Again, you can get rid of crime in Newark today. If Ras Baraka and the police commissioner suspended.
Again,
let me finish.
That's that way of thinking that I'm pushing back. Police shouldn't be ever involved in this.
If Ras Baraka and the police commissioner today suspended due process. Listen. if they suspended due process, Miranda rights, if they
That's
just
violent.
said, you know what, we're going to get crime off the street by any means necessary, there'd be no crime in Newark tomorrow.
Right, so again, you're
So
making
that's
up
not how
stuff.
this country works.
This is not violent.
That's
You were
not how
talking about
democracy
violence.
works. I'm sorry.
Conrad, you were talking about violence. I am
It
not.
doesn't matter. See, you know
Compulsory
what, Jonathan?
voting isn't
You
violent.
have
No,
an exception.
that is the thing.
You
That
are a
is the
classic
thing.
bleeding
Every
heart
example
liberal.
you use is an
I'm
example of
sorry.
violence.
You are a classic bleeding heart liberal. There's always an exception.
And you're
for what
someone who
you
doesn't
think
answer an
is
argument.
important. There's always an exception.
So,
You can, in your love and compassion, you can
And
oppress
answering
people,
arguments?
because when liberals oppress people, it's not really oppressive. because
Oppress.
You're just doing
Watch a
what's in
video
their
is not
best interest.
oppression. Shooting someone is.
Come on, Jonathan.
well, Jonathan,
You're equating
Come on.
one with the other. When you're looking
Come on.
at how it would be enforced, the easiest way to do that would be like easy fine, or if you don't pay the fine, then
you're
when
gonna
you go to get
fine
something
people
in the
because
hall-
they
wait,
don't
hold
vote.
on. When you go to get something in the city hall, they're like,
Okay.
hey, you have this voting fine. You need to pay that before we give you these other services. No police involved. No enforcement that's violent. No Mabutu. No general.
When
No,
that becomes
it
a
is simply-
referendum, I will
we
vote
all,
against it.
or you don't even have to pay the fine. You can just watch this video about civics.
well,
Because
Jonathan,
public ignorance is
let
not
me,
dealt
and
with.
Reverend Conrad, let me ask a question.
Next, we're gonna make them eat their vegetables too.
Look, I'm born in 67, and I kind of was just with my mother as she went back to school and obtained her degree and everything. And this was at Essex County College in King. And I can remember that during those times that community was everything. So if something was going out and we wanted to go forth on an issue, the issue was brought forth. We met at our churches. There was a panel, you discussed it, and when you left, you kind of knew which way the community was going.
Right.
And I am talking about more and more that we need to do more teaching so people can understand why this issue is coming out, why it would be helpful for our community to collectively get together and vote this way, and everybody casts a vote. And even if you don't agree, still cast your vote. Because we need numbers. I could always remember um, Carol Clark always said, it looks like we have ghosts, that there's nobody there, but we have numbers here. So when I was coming up in the 70s, it was like a time where we were prospering. We were coming together. We came out to meetings. We talked about it. We engaged. We showed up at the polls, and all this was going on. But now it's like people are just not doing anything, and they don't feel as though they have to do anything. But I will say this: last time it was the young people who turned around and turned things around. But but for community, how do we get back to community and helping people understand, and that we all move together, and the rooms were very diverse when these things were going on in our community.
Yes, but think about this. You were born in the 60s. I was born in the 60s. Ed, you were born in the 60s. Yeah, Jonathan, you were born probably in the 90s. Late 60s? Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
He said 90.
But listen. I mean, I'm also a person that I think as Black people, we've got to, I think sometimes we don't see the progress we've made. Like, to compare meetings today to the 60s is to forget that in the 60s we were disenfranchised. We were outside of the system, and we were held outside of the system by statute and by custom. In Newark, the Italians ran city government. Blacks were not in the door the way we our numbers represented across the board in terms of city government. But since Ken Gibson on right through Ras Baraka, and not only him, but throughout the state, Black people now are in the positions of power because we have voted in great numbers. We have turned out. All of that we've done, I think. But the problem is we're such a soulful people that everything we've done has been based on our emotions, our faith, the ability to galvanize people, to excite people, to inspire people. But you know, there's some things in life like math. There's some things in life like accounting and bookkeeping and engaging in the political process that aren't inspiring at all. In fact, they can be very tedious.
And I agree with
statistics. And as a people, that's the one thing that we've got to continue to remind Black people to do, that we're not always going to be inspired. There's not always going to be an Obama. There's not always going to be a Ras Baraka, but we need to engage this process regardless, so even if this race is not exciting, because that's how we hold the power that we have gotten since the 1960s. When you think about, lastly,
so now
we are today,
you're starting to speak my language now. You're starting to agree a lot with me now.
Yeah, but not through compulsion. I mean, you have to inspire people.
I think that when you're talking about compulsory voting and you're talking about inspiring people, I think that there are two things. First, there's a concerted effort to cause apathy, I think, in social media. I think there are a lot of people who are playing games. A lot of this has been documented in terms of what people do with elections, whether it was the style that Trump or people after him on both sides.
I knew that name would have to come up.
I'm talking about in terms of social media. Like a lot of different people, it's not just Trump. Right now, everyone does it, right? They have social media for targeting, to spread disinformation. And a lot of people, and my students, I mean, I'm a teacher. My students are full of disinformation. I had kids quoting the Klan, right? Because there are a lot of things that are just being targeted to them that they don't know that they're actually quoting the Klan, right? That they're actually doing, like, so there's a lot of disinformation.
Or socialists.
Right. Or
Klan or socialists.
Well, I mean, I don't put the Klan and socialists in the same.
I do. In fact, the socialists and communists have killed more people worldwide than the Klan have. I absolutely do. The socialists and communists have killed millions of people all over the earth. So I do.
Like Bernie Sanders is a socialist. I don't think he's a mass murderer, right?
Yeah,
he just has a different understanding of political.
Okay, well, David Duke is not a mass murderer. I'm going to do what Republicans do. You just picked a political guy.
Well, right, and I'm saying that, like, when you're murderer. So I'm saying that the system has to be shaken up, and there are two ways compulsory does that. First, even in the process of doing it, these debates that we're having, right, about why like compulsory voting would literally make in predominantly Black cities would have them dominate the state.
Okay, now let me ask you a question. Because the concept of a free society,
it's about your community, right? But however, I know we are going to we are getting ready to go to the next segment, so I'm going to give you the last word on this. So I mean, you're going to say what you say now.
My only
and all the other stuff, right? So before I give you the last say, I'm going to give you the last say.
Listen,
but I'm like, voting kills no one. It just educates. That's it. No police involved in enforcement.
Yeah, see,
it is revolutionary and transformative. All right, Conrad.
You ended with a classic, and really, I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm like Malcolm. I'm extremely hard on white liberals and white progressives. And the reason why I am is that their logic is a lot like what you just said. I showed my class a film yesterday about Robert Moses, the man who, through force of will and his own personal desire and his personal love of the automobile and the free flow of the cities, destroyed neighborhoods because he felt the progress. He went extra democratic processes. He had no regard for public opinion, and he made it happen. And I said, now keep in mind,
forced evictions, violence.
Yeah, well, but keep in mind, we have people doing that same thing today in cities, forcing bike lanes. In New York City soon, if you go from Brooklyn to Manhattan or Queens from Manhattan, you're going to have to pay $28 Nobody, your governor, thank God, your Jersey politicians are fighting it, but nobody voted on congestion pricing. The citizens of New York haven't voted, but it's people who think they're right, who are forcing 60 and 70-year-old black folks supposed to get on the bike. So what I'm trying to say to you is, I don't want anyone to tell me how to live, be they conservative or liberal. And I'm telling you, Jonathan, when you talk about compulsory, you're a debate coach. Study the etymology of that word. Compulsory means I will force you to do something. That is antithetical to what living in a free society is. You're going to force people to eat their vegetables, to take their vitamins. You're going to force people to take baths every day. All of these things are good for a human being, to drink milk or water. So we don't want to live in the nanny state. Okay, the nanny state tells people everything they can and cannot do. Free society is about people having the freedom, and now you have to educate the population. That's the responsibility that comes with freedom.
All right, so I'm not gonna say anything
That's
else. I said you have the last word on it.
I don't think you can come back from that. You can huff and puff, but you can't blow that house down.
Well, I mean, see, I said you were gonna have the last word.
Drop the mic.
Give you the last word.
I already dropped the mic.
It fights every fiber of my being. I'm like,
I already dropped the mic, but you can spend the rest of the time. I said what I have to say. I'm out.
Hey, Conrad, before you go, we
Yes.
just want to say congratulations on Barack, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Yeah, my son.
We got to have him on the show.
Well, yes, hopefully soon, one day. I sent him to a boarding school. I have 5 children that grew up and went to public school. 4 that went to public school, and they all did well. They went to college and all of that. But we decided that we would send him to a private school. We started at a Black Montessori school in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and now he's in boarding school. So we it's like anything else with your children. You look for the best educational opportunities, but education, you always have to teach your own babies simultaneously. So I thank you for that compliment. Pray for him.
We got to go to the next segment.
Before we go to the
I'm
next
just saying,
segment,
right? We need to.
Brother, I already said what I had to say, Jonathen.
For
I'll
1 minute,
program.
For those who don't know,
John, you took all that time because for compulsory voting. Let Donna have a question.
For one moment, for those who don't know, what are we congratulating Barack for?
Oh, that's so my son is going to boarding school, and one of the things that Percy Sutton taught me, he said, Mr. Minister, he said, when I was going to graduate school, he enthusiastically wrote for me, and he said, we have to, and we have done that. We have to penetrate certain institutions, and there are a lot of opportunities for young African Americans and Black families, and so. Thank God there are increasing numbers of charter schools. There are obviously the parochial schools, but there are also independent schools that bright young African Americans have opportunities to attend, and boarding schools. And but the main thing is you still have to teach your children your values, because if you don't, nature abhors a vacuum, and teachers will teach their values. And it's important for parents, the family, the nuclear unit is how we came up. Okay, I did not learn values from my teachers. I learned values from my parents, my family, and we have to keep that tradition alive.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. God bless.
And let him come on and let us talk to him.
All right.
We would love to have him on. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, thank you.
All right.
All right, take care.
Jonathan, be quiet. He got the last word.
No, I said thank you. Until next time.
You can work with that. Hey, listen, I've dropped the mic, brother. I've said what I had to say.
All right, cool. So we're
next year trying to deconstruct that.
All right. Well, not really, but I'll talk to you later, brother. We're on for getting our next guest on, and well, we had all of our guests on, and TJ Whitaker,
TJ Whitaker.
Chris Duran,
I've been
and
looking under
Carol.
rocks and everything for you, brother TJ.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I've been looking for you.
Uh-oh.
And Carol Tanzi.
I'm in trouble?
No, good things.
Okay.
Well, we're going to start this next segment. This is actually part of a national trend. There are a bunch of labor strikes and labor movements going on all over the country. And we're jumping right in to this one, right? Like, the writer strike, the actor strike. There are a bunch of other strikes going on right at this moment all over the country. I believe there are more labor actions that are going on now than in many, many years. There's a labor action going on, right? There was the Rutgers strike earlier this year, right? Which we're going to talk about a little as well. But there was something I saw that was just egregious about a nursing strike at RWJ Barnabas,
RWJ Barnabas.
RWJ Barnabas Hospital. And the nurses are striking and for better conditions, because we all know what happened in COVID. We all know that nurses, the medical profession, they got burnt out. They got overworked. I've got friends who've been in hospitals and there's a nursing shortage because people don't want to be a nurse because they've been burnt out. They've been overused. They are underpaid. There's a shortage for a reason, right? You have the working conditions that are bad that they're going to talk about. And what Barnabas Hospital did, right? What they did was just foul. Like last week, they literally stopped the health benefits for striking nurses. So we're going to get into that and talk about all this stuff right now. Our guest, Carol Tanzi, is a veteran, over 20 years as a nurse, taking care of people as an RN, as a registered nurse, and is one of the people involved in the striking action. We have TJ Whitaker and Chris Duran, who are organizers, and Jacob Chaffin, who are all organizers who've been involved in labor movements or student movements in one way or another in terms of organizing. Jacob Chaffin was involved in the Rutgers strike earlier this year. TJ Whitaker is helping out with the current strike with the work with these nurses, and Chris Duran was involved in Seton Hall's protest for and a successful movement to push Africana studies on Seton Hall's campus, among many other things that he has been doing. So we want to have a robust discussion right now about, well, what's going on right now. And first, we want to start with you, Carol. What's going on and how are you doing? Welcome to All Politics Are Local.
Thank you very much. I guess we're day 35, 36 of our unfair labor practice strike. We're kind of at a stalemate. We just got a notice today that they're calling us back to the table. We have a mediator, but it hasn't yielded anything. It's 3 weeks since we were at the table, and we got a notice today that we're going to go back to the table next Thursday. I guess that's at their convenience.
So first, what is the strike about? Like, nurses strike, nurses are going on strike. I said some stuff at the top about what Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital is doing, right? But what is it like? Why are the nurses on strike?
So the short answer is we've been working under what we feel haven't been good conditions for optimum care for our patients. We have been understaffed for the acuity of our patients for a long time.
And what does that mean for the acuity of your patients? What does that mean?
So there's a classification system for how sick patients are. Like somebody who has a cut finger would have to wait when it's somebody with chest pain comes in. If somebody has kidney failure, can't breathe, heart rate, heart issues, they're going to go ahead of someone who just had, even like unless you're bleeding out, you're not going first before those people. So there's a classification system that has largely not been paid attention to in a long time. They start to act like a patient is a patient is a patient, but it's so much more than that. And it's before COVID, it was bad, but since COVID, it's been impossible.
So what does that mean in real terms? Like, my mother was in the hospital, went to the emergency room a few weeks ago, and had to wait before she spent about 6 hours just waiting, not for a test result, but for a doctor to come in and just read the test result, right? And the waiting room was packed, like overcrowded. What does that mean in real terms when you're talking about the shortage of nurses, or the way in which hospitals are placing nurses? Like, does that mean on a floor, right? Like, how many nurses should be there for optimal care? How many nurses do? Oh, can you hear me? Oh, hi. Can you hear me? Oh no, we can't hear you. Yeah, we can't hear you at all.
Are you on mute?
She's not on mute. You might be on mute on your own phone, but it's not. You're not on mute in StreamYard.
So two things, like maybe take your stop your cam and try to talk in and see if that helps. And if that doesn't help, go out and come back in.
Yes, that might work. Both of those things might work.
And then while we wait,
Jonathan,
so take your picture, stop your cam,
and see if that works. And in the meantime, TJ Whitaker, what got you involved in this, and what are some of those what are some of the issues that are being used?
So I actually, Jonathan, I think in order to answer my question, we should probably go to Jacob, right? Because that's how I got. So Maps of Freedom School, we've been on board for the last 2 to 3 weeks. I attended a couple of organizing meetings that Jacob held locally because the CEO of RWJ Barnabas lives in Maplewood. Some actions that are being planned, but I think Jacob could probably speak a little bit more to some of the questions you were asking about the numbers and the short staff, and that would put some things into context in terms of what's coming up this weekend.
Okay, good. Jacob, we'll go to you. And question, Carol, is your sound on yet?
I'm back.
Okay, you are back. All right, so we're gonna go back to you, Carol. Then we're gonna go to Jacob for that second level for that question. So, Carol, what does it mean? What does it mean right now when you're talking about in your experience as a nurse, as someone who's striking? What has been your experience in care in the hospital policies about staffing and care?
So the problem we are always encountering at our hospital is there is no policy. Everything is a guideline. And for us, that's problematic because if you can't enforce it, it's just chaos. Anything goes. And that is primarily why we're having these problems, because we don't operate with guidelines because there's no backing it up. We're legally obligated as a nurse from my license, right, to only take on responsibility that is within my license, that is within safety standards, policies. But when they put these guidelines, they're very loose. And if something were to happen, if I was following a guideline and not a policy, then it comes down to my license. So we've been put in a position. So during COVID, things were dicey, right? A lot of unknowns. We were asked to change things, to raise the bar. We did, without question. We sacrificed personal things, family things, for the sake of the patients, because that's what nurses do. Pandemic's mostly over. Now we're asking for things to go back to normal and in a controllable environment, and it's not happening, and that's why we're on strike. We no longer want to be complicit with a system that doesn't honor that a nurse can only do so much, mentally, physically, and patients deserve more and expect more. And frankly, it's not a good look when you ask a patient, they'll tell you they had a bad experience at the hospital, and all you hear is, I had my call light on, the nurse didn't come in. Like, that's a terrible feeling for a nurse who knows that they didn't drink anything today. They didn't pee because they didn't drink anything. That you don't get to ever have a thought about yourself, even like as a point of dignity. And we're just being put in an impossible situation. So we literally have been pushed to the point where we're saying we're not going to be complicit with that anymore. We know it's not right, and we're not willing to be complicit with it anymore.
That's powerful, especially because it's like all of us will be vulnerable in a hospital with patient care. And the question, and this is going to be a question I'm going to direct to Jacob, it seems like there's structurally hospitals are making it so that they don't have the responsibility for responsible staffing. They leave it on the nurses being negligent or the doctors being negligent. So it seems like at a hospital level, they're not hiring enough nurses. They're not paying them enough to be able to do the things that they have to do to be able to take care of us. Is that what you see going on? Talk to me about, like, what are some of these numbers, and then what is your role and involvement in this?
You said that was for Jacob?
Yes, because I'm organizing question.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, I'm mostly I organize at Rutgers. We went on strike this last April. Honestly, I came up onto their picket lines talking with the nurses because we had common enemies. We had common. The president and CEO of Robert Wood Johnson is a Maplewood resident, and he's also on the board of governors at Rutgers.
So there's this Rutgers connection again.
Yeah, and they're constantly trying to. There's big money in merging the medical school and joining with Barnabas for Rutgers. And through this process, what I've kind of learned and peel it back is, you know, the boards of governors, the boards of directors, whatever board it is in New Jersey, you look at it, you have millionaire lawyers, you have real estate developers, you have basically a who's who of controlling where we live, what our health situation is, what we learn, how expensive it is for education, all of that. It's exact same people. So really my involvement was just
so in the case of nursing right now, in the case of the nursing strike, there's a direct connection between the people involved who are involved with making decisions about the nursing strike and people who are involved with the Rutgers strike.
Absolutely. I mean, it goes. I've really just kind of learned through this, like, how deep it really goes, right? You know, Mark Manigan, the CEO of Robert Wood Johnson, which we have a protest tomorrow in Maplewood, going to his house actually. He's on the board of governors at Rutgers. He's the president, but then the chair of the board of Robert Wood Johnson is one of the largest real estate developers in Central Jersey. And, you know, so he owns a lot of property where our members live, where a lot of nurses live. You know, it's and then a lot of them end up being on the transition teams for the governors. This is kind of like, you know, some middle step for them, right? I think it's one of those things, like, you know, is true that there's like a group of like ruling class that's manipulating everything, and then you look at it and you're like, oh no, for real though, this is like It's very direct and very cut clear. We have common interest as workers in the state of New Jersey. Is we're defending, fighting for safe staffing ratios affects the same communities that the workers live in. It's the same people who jack up the price of tuition at Rutgers while trying to degrade the working conditions at the same time. It's the same people who make the decisions for the budget cuts, be it in Newark or Camden. For really no other reason. You can't explain anything other than racism. It's exact same people.
So when you're talking about staffing cuts, and whoever can best answer this question, right, in terms of staffing ratios, what is the connection between the nurses' strike and the staffing ratios, and how bad is it? Like, I want to get into the real nitty gritty of, like, when I go to the hospital, like if I were going to go to Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital, right? And what are the conditions there that if I were to go there and they're nickel and diming nurses, what are the implications of that?
So I just want to say that it's not even just specific to Robert Wood Johnson. Mm-hmm. If you go to any hospital, because right now in New Jersey, there's only 3 big monsters that are all of healthcare, right? It's Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas, Atlantic Health, and Hackensack Meridian. Mm-hmm. 3, they're the same beast. All 3 of them are the same exact beast.
And Carol, where does Jefferson Stratford come in? They're just like a small in the corner hospital.
I don't even know what that hospital is. Is that the one by Philly?
Yes, but they don't even. Okay.
That's in Pennsylvania.
No, it's in Jersey.
I don't know that.
It says exit 3, but it must be so small that you can't even. Okay, it doesn't even.
I'm not aware. That's not Barnabas. That's not with us.
No, it's not a part, but it's a public hospital, Jefferson Stratford. Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. What you were saying, we're talking about this monster. They're all the same. And what was the point that you were making?
The point is that it doesn't matter what hospital you go to; they all play the same game. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of scientific studies, right? Nursing care is based on scientific studies. We put research into practice. It's called best practices. Mm-hmm. We're not supposed to do anything that isn't scientifically proven to be the best care for outcome, the best mode of care for an outcome, the best outcome. By not adhering to those studies that show when you spread a nurse too thin, when they have too many patients, that the outcomes are not going to be good. It's more likely they're going to make a mistake. It's more likely something's going to get overlooked. It's more likely that the patient will have an adverse event. That's all scientific studies. I'm not, making that up. But it's likely to happen at any hospital because everywhere in this country, every hospital is playing the same game.
I just want to come in on that. When nursing, I think, is like the most egregious version of understaffing, right? Because like we all have a vested interest in having well-staffed hospitals. We all want more individualized patient care because it's our loved ones, and nurses also obviously want that same thing, right? But what we're seeing happen is across all industries, even if it's nursing, again, I think is really egregious, but it happens in teaching. It happens in any public service whatsoever, and it's called lean production, right? If you can have fewer people on the shop floor, in the classrooms, in our hospitals, any type of social services at all, and then you can, if they try to the fewest number of people, so they can jack up the profit on the other end, right? So they know. No matter what, if it, TJ's a teacher, we know that a lower student ratio per teacher is good for children. We know this. We've known this for decades. It doesn't take an academic paper to figure that out. But when you run everything for profit, like we do, and a lot of times I think what's happening now is public institutions are being run as if they are for profit, and they're increasingly trying to privatize as much as possible internally to make them run more and more like private institutions. But Robert Wood Johnson, this is also the connection to Rutgers, it's about privatizing the public hospitals Those mergers are about bringing them under and then running them on the same logic.
So the problem with the lean model is that was, if I'm correct, based on car manufacturing, not people.
Right.
But and Carol and Jake, you what is the Hippocratic? What is the Hippocratic? What's the oath?
Hippocratic oath.
Okay, Hippocratic oath. And how relevant is that today? And if somebody walks in there and they don't have insurance, but they're bleeding out, and and then I guess you stabilize them, but I don't know, what is the chance that this person is going to be treated as in a manner, if somebody came in there with the same situation but they had great health care, same situation, how's it going to play out?
The Hippocratic oath is something that doctors talk about. That's something that doctors are beholden to. Healthcare, I can't speak to the insurance side of it because I'm a bedside nurse. I have no idea what somebody's insurance status is.
Right.
Like that's not the part of the chart that I'm in.
Okay.
So I can honestly say that when I give care, it's the same to every single person.
Okay.
I can't speak to if that the outcome would be better or worse based on someone's insurance. I can't speak to that.
And where would that begin to fall? I mean, I guess fall apart. I guess because you would. I know, like they say, there's charity care and things. All things should be treated equal. But when does the care and where does it begin to fall apart at? Once day 1 or 2 come in and the person is evaluated by the people who are looking at that part of the chart, and then they make a recommendation to let them out, but they don't say it as blatantly as because they don't have the money or.
I can give you an example of what I do know. When I worked on the teenager floor, we had a boy who came from Mexico, so not documented, no papers, no insurance, and he had gotten some kind of an infection in his bone. So their recommendation was to amputate, but he was a young kid, so we all were like, no, that's not. Like, we advocated for him, he advocated for himself, and they had to, instead of cutting his leg off, they replaced his bone with a titanium rod so that he would still have his leg. But that required him to stay in the hospital for, I forget if it was 6 or 8 weeks, for antibiotic treatment because he had nowhere to go home and no one to help him to continue that care at home. So we kept him in our hospital on our floor for 6 or 8 weeks, giving him antibiotics 3 times a day, physical therapy, and that kid went home walking. So I don't, in my experience, I haven't seen like him get tossed out. And even at one point, he was like, I feel so bad. I've been telling you my name is like Jesus, but it's really Jose. And I was like, I really don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me what your name is. Like, we know you. You've been here forever. You're like our kid now. Like, it doesn't matter to us. So, like, from a nursing perspective, I could care less. You need me to help you, I'm helping you.
Right. Okay. Jonathan, you can't hear you, Jonathan.
And the whole point of the strike really...
Jonathan, start over because you were...
I know. And the whole point of the strike really seems to be like, it's the nurses that the nurses aren't given the ability to have good working conditions, and that those bad working conditions translate into patients not being able, like being frustrated, right? Mistakes possibly being made, but being blamed on the nurses.
100%.
Structure.
100%. All the responsibility lies on us with none of the power, because I'm obligated not to enter into a situation that I know is not safe or appropriate. So all that becomes on my shoulder. And there's a lot of pressure in a hospital. I work in the pediatric recovery room right now. To take another patient out of the operating room, take another patient out of the operating room. Well, if the one I'm taking care of right now isn't stable, I'm not taking another patient out of the operating room. Well, they're going to have to hold up the operating room. There's a lot of pressure from surgeons, and I'm not letting that happen because I'm comfortable with what I know I'm supposed to do. Would a less senior, less vocal, strong nurse take the patient? Maybe, but I would advise her not to, because that's your license. If something goes wrong, they're going to say, why'd you take the patient?
So that's why you're talking about, and really those are the stakes of the strike, because is one of the demands, like what are some of the demands? Are the demands like we need policies, we need a certain staffing ratio? Like what are the specific demands of the strikers, and where are some of the sticking points right now? Because I think if we knew where Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital is what their sticking points are, right? I think that goes to whether we want to go there for care or what overall care like is in New Jersey based on what all of these hospitals are doing. So
right now, the whole state is watching us, and you can trust me on that. Every hospital is watching what happens to us because we're the first hospital in New Jersey to challenge this, and we're unionized. A lot of hospitals aren't unionized, so that's the starting point. We're not even asking for anything outrageous. There is an accepted level of what should be nurse-to-patient ratio. But like Jacob was talking about, they're constantly pushing it. Do more with less. And if we're able to achieve these ratios at the hospital,
so give me an idea. What ratios are we talking about, right? Like, I think if we knew the specifics, I think people would be like, "What?" Like, as in.
Okay. So
Carol, can you tell us like different the ICU, like what's a typical ratio for you right now, and what are we fighting for?
Okay, so in an ICU, you should have 1 or 2 patients to 1 nurse, depending on what I was talking about, the acuity. In an ICU with devices, meaning if a person is on a ventilator because they can't breathe on their own, if they have a machine pumping their heart, if they have a machine pumping their kidneys, that would be like 1 nurse to 1 patient. And sometimes, depending on the device, it's 1 nurse takes care of the device and 1 nurse takes care of the patient.
So in those situations, you told me what was appropriate and safe. So now what do they do? Like what?
I'm telling you that it's not happening that way, and that's why we're on strike, and we refuse to be complicit with that anymore.
So what numbers do they put in? Like, what have you seen? What have you experienced? Instead of 1 to 1 or 1 to 2 in those serious cases, what are some of the things you've seen?
I can't speak to it personally because I don't work in those units, but I can tell you it's more than 1 to 1. It's more than 1 to 2.
And that's what the sticking point is. Like, these are the demands. And
100%, that's what we're sticking for. Do we deserve a fair raise? Of course we do, but that's not what we're fighting for.
So really, further explicate, like, in your experience, or like, what are give me some more detail on some of these numbers, and like, what is the reality versus what is accepted? What is the reality versus what are you fighting for?
So let's give an example on a medical surgical unit, right? Because not everybody's in ICU. So when they come into the hospital and they need a lower level of care, so they could give you 5 or 6 patients, right? 6. Let's just imagine 6 patients, and you have to give medications to all those patients. Mm-hmm. You have to make sure that they have proper hygiene. You have to make sure that they're getting their therapies that they need. You're constantly assessing them, evaluating them, doing your documentation, making sure they walk, making sure that whatever other therapies, tests, you're coordinating tests, you're God forbid you need to offer some emotional support, right? After somebody has a stroke, let's say, there's a huge emotional component to being able to get them to handle that diagnosis. They can't talk to their family. Their family can't accept this new reality for them. There's a huge psychosocial component that the nurse is meant to facilitate, to absorb. We're spread so thin that is the thing that's getting pushed to the wayside. There's so many regulatory committees, so many regulatory issues that the charting, the amount of documentation that we have to do for every single thing we do. If I told you what I had to go through to get a drug, a narcotic for a patient who's in pain, screaming for pain in the recovery room, you wouldn't believe it. Your head would explode. It's just such a bureaucratic, complicated mess that it'll blow your mind. So when you're stretched, like the amount of responsibility that is placed on a nurse in a one shift, it's mind-blowing to anybody. And most people are very unaware, including everyone that's a hospital administrator, very unaware of the real responsibility. Our president jokes around all the time saying, instead of bring your kid to work day, let's do bring your administrator to work day. But guess what? Nobody ever wants to do it because they would have to be faced with the reality that they're just, if they ignore it, then they don't have to address it. But it's messed up. And the thing that nurses hate the most is VIPs, right? So we're all rallying against Governor Murphy right now because he's, been absent in this because he's complicit as well. He's a recipient of big money. He's all entangled in that big corporate crap stuff. So he's been silent, right? But he doesn't have to worry about it. He has no skin in the game because if he goes to the hospital, he's going to have one nurse for his patient, and that's the part that annoys the crap out of nurses, is that if you don't have skin in the game, stand back and listen to the people who are telling you. If I'm telling you I need this to do my job the correct way, why are we arguing? Why are we arguing? If there's all kinds of science and research, why am I on the street right now when I'm telling you, research is telling you that this is what's appropriate and necessary, but right now I'm on strike, day 30, whatever I'm on.
Can I just come on that with so I agree with Carol. I think that as I've been out on the picket lines talking with people, as someone who just goes to the hospital when a family member's sick or I need to be in the hospital, I didn't really understand what nurses do. You know what I mean? It's like we see them for like a few minutes at a time. They come in, they make us laugh, and then they go back to the next patient. It talked to some of them, and I really encourage people to go out to the picket lines and just talk to people about what their working conditions are like. You find out that they're rotating every 30 minutes a different patient because they have a rotation. Certain things have to be done on a regular basis, right? And then I tell people now, it's like we don't see as patients and as community, we don't see all of the other work they're doing in between and how they have to eat a lunch within 10-15 minutes so they can get back out onto the floor because they don't want to overburden their coworkers. You know what I mean? It's like it really has just been so illuminating to hear the stories and the different issues that they can deal with within a 12-hour shift.
Let's say I have 6 patients and I need to take a break. I have to get another nurse who has 5 or 6 patients too to take care of my patients so I can go pee or I can go grab a drink of water because we're not allowed to have water at the nurse's station. That's another. Oh yeah. Sure? No, I couldn't even make that shit up.
Wow.
Not allowed to have water at the nursing station.
Is there a safety reason for that? Like what?
I think it's cool. I have no fucking idea.
Like, wait, are you saying nurses can't have at the nurses station?
No.
Nurses can't have bottled water.
No, you cannot.
So you literally have to get up, go over to the pantry.
If you have time. If
you have time, yeah.
Yeah, that's why we never pee because we never drink. So why would you need to pee?
And is there any type of scientific medical best practice like where nurses just drinking water and accidentally drink the wrong thing or like is there any basis other than like cruelty?
I think it's just cruel. I think it's another control thing. Because my whole career, I never had a problem with it. This stupidity came about a couple years ago.
And so this is the policy that is like just in Robert Wood Johnson.
No, it's for all nurses everywhere.
Wow.
I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of dirty little secrets that we literally are just sick of.
So
sick of it.
they give you too many patients and they don't let you drink water?
Yeah.
Wow.
Human rights, right?
You know what this makes me think of when my mom's she's gone on to glory now, but she was a social worker, and I remember there was such a horrendous case that came out, and it was based on, it was bound to happen because of caseload, but social worker, for whatever reason, and I guess you would say under no conditions should anybody do anything, but when things are being piled on you and you're trying to maintain your job, and who knows, but the worst things can just happen. And a case happened in Newark where on a caseload, two kids were found in a basement, in a trunk or something, but one of the things that was found out was it led back to the caseload that the DIFAS workers were carrying. They were like just way out over their caseload.
Sure.
And it's just, and some of the outcomes that happen when people are just, it's sad. It's really sad. And
So one thing I want to add to that people don't have the perspective of. So now here is this social worker who was drawn to this profession because of who they are, right? They innately want to help people. Now they're taking care of whatever their caseload is. They had another one, but they're kids. They need you. So you keep doing it. Now this horrible thing happens that probably could have been avoided if they didn't have such a high caseload. But now what happens to that social worker, right? The guilt, the shame, that is not even their responsibility. So this year was the first time there was a criminal case in Vanderbilt University Hospital where a nurse was criminally prosecuted for making a mistake.
Wow.
That is precedent. That's precedent now. So that's even more important why I know under my license, I have a responsibility. So that's even more important now. I will not lose my license because a hospital would put profits over patient care. I won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I think that brings that whole perspective in mind, in that nurses are striking not just for working conditions for themselves and their patients, but it literally makes your profession impossible. It is
impossible.
You will not just get sued, but criminally charged when it's the administrators who are the criminals. It's like they
the burden of guilt, the burden of being put in a position where you can't do the right thing, and that's a moral thing. Nurses, social workers, these people who are charged with the responsibility of caring for people, it's a terrible feeling.
Because you either have the pressure of a job that will fire you or take away your health benefits, or you put yourself in a position where you're taking a risk, but you have to do it, right? Like right now, it seems like the strike is really the only thing you could do as a part of your own professional responsibility.
100%. They keep talking about burnout, right? Who gives a shit about burnout, right? Nobody, right? Unless it happens to you, right? These administrators don't know nothing of burnout. They were home during COVID. They didn't have to be thrown on the front line. Like, it was like crickets at that hospital, except for nurses, respiratory therapists, nursing assistants, the housekeepers, the people who do the actual work in the hospital, right? People sitting at home making decisions for us. It's about what would be okay for us to reuse our mask for a week straight, all that crap. That hurts. That hurts your feelings when you know you were put against every logical thing you've ever learned about infection control, but you did it because they asked you to. It was for the patients. It was the best we could do, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we're a lot smarter 2 years later, right? A lot smarter, I hope.
Well, it sounds like we're treating nurses the same way we treated firefighters in 9/11. They were like, they're the heroes, right? They're the heroes. They rushed into the building. But when they're doing cleanup, when their lungs are being infected, we don't want to pay for them to get medical care. And it seems like it's the same thing with nurses and COVID, right? We know
100%.
that nurses lost their lives in terms of helping people. They lost their lives, right? Many had to deal with trauma and PTSD. And now that COVID seems to be like the worst parts are behind us, and nurses are like, hey, we just need conditions that don't send us to jail, that don't hurt innocent people, that don't make us lose our license, right? We're no longer in a crisis, but you're treating us in a way that is actually hurting our ability to function as nurses. And they're
That's
like,
exactly the truth. Exactly the truth. And the hurtful part is nurses, all people who are in these types of professions, right? When you work with a certain group of people and you go through these very traumatic experiences, you bond, right? Because I can't go home and talk about my day at work with my family because they just would never understand it, right? Unless you're in those very difficult situations, someone else just can't even understand, even if you did explain it to them, what's going on, what you've been through, right? So now we've all been traumatized from the work experiences, and basically they're telling us we don't matter. We don't matter.
and I think what adds insult to industry, and what adds insult to injury is that after taking care of everyone else and literally risking your lives to do it, they take away your health insurance. Can you talk about that? Like, that's what I read. And I'm like, yo, you did this to nurses? You took away nurses' health insurance? The people who take care of everybody else. You take away them, and you're a hospital? You're a hospital? Wow.
I'm going to blow your mind with this one. So, a very unpublished information here. Nurses pay a lot of money for their benefits, and Robert Wood Johnson is what's considered self-insured. So I pay the hospital they deduct it out of my paycheck, and I can only go to Robert Wood Johnson hospitals and see Robert Wood Johnson doctors.
Wow.
So if I have a heart attack in New York City, out of my plan. If I get cancer and I want to go to Memorial Sloan Kettering, that's not in my plan. So this is all keeping the money in the family, right? The day I don't work, I don't have insurance. There's no insurance for me the day I don't work anymore. We don't have, like, firefighters get their benefits for themselves and their families till they die. Teachers, not nurses. The day I'm done, no insurance.
Wow. Now, for teachers, they changed that under Christie, right? And under Chris Christie, after you retire, you have to buy your own health insurance. But what you're talking about is more mind-blowing, because you're literally saying you can only get insurance at the company store.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Insurance that's not at the company store.
You know what they do too, which is a disgusting, just shows you how incestuous the whole business is with insurance, the pharmaceuticals, and the hospital industry. We're only allowed to get our prescriptions from Walgreens, and they put a Walgreens in our hospital lobby.
Wow. They are juicing you like they're a company town. Like, are you nurses or are you West Virginia coal miners? Like, at the turn of the century. Like, we read about this stuff and we're like, what?
We're a source of revenue to them. We pay to park. We have
Right.
to pay when we come to park. Like
Wait,
to,
stop. Wait, time out. You have to no.
Pay
They
to go to
own
work.
the parking lots, and the nurse.
And they
Wait,
don't have
hold
insurance.
on, because this is just petty. This is just
No.
petty. Please repeat that. You're a nurse. You do
Yep.
double shifts, all the other stuff. You drive to work, and you have to what?
so we have to pay to park. They take it. It's very convenient. They take it right out of our paycheck.
Oh, wait.
Company town.
Oh,
Robert Wood Johnson, the
no.
biggest company town in New
Robert
Jersey.
Wood Johnson University Hospital in New Brunswick. Whoa. And y'all been
Yeah,
Wow.
we're done. We had enough.
Wow. Wait. And you're not even is one of the demands free parking?
No.
It should be, but you're not even asking for free.
If I told you what we're asking for versus what they're fighting us for, so when the negotiations first started, we have never gotten a fair market raise, meaning, let's say the if national inflation rate is 7%, whatever, it has never happened. We get 2 or 3%, never anything more than 3 in the last several contracts, right? So that's always getting eaten up by our insurance premiums going up, parking going up, cost of living, right? So it's always kind of eaten up. Meanwhile, they always take something else away. Like even the reason we voted no to this last contract was because that they wouldn't make the ratios a policy. They were only making it guidelines, and they were tying it to a sick call. So what they were saying was a sick call. So they would say, okay, a guideline will be 1 nurse for 4 patients, unless someone on your shift calls out sick, and then you're on your own. Well, nurses might need to call out sick, wouldn't you think? So they're actually trying to penalize us for using one of our benefits.
And are you responsible for if you call out sick or maybe if you take a day off? Are you responsible for finding your coverage?
No, because there's no such thing as taking a day off.
Right.
You can call out sick, but clearly it is I don't want to say punishable, but you get crap for it. You get called into the office. You're allowed to have so many sick things. You need a note, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of policies around sick time, and they're always harassing us over sick time, always making comments about it. But that's why we voted no. We're like, no, we need a policy, and it should not be tied to sick time. The loophole for sick time basically makes the whole guideline bullshit, you know?
So, like, the thing that sounds so crazy in what you're like, because it's getting worse and worse. The stuff that you're describing is getting worse and worse. When you're like, we have to pay for parking. What? You have to pay for like you have to pay. So just to go there and work, they take a tax if you drive there in property they own as an employee. That's wrong. That should be illegal. You should legally have to provide parking if you own the building, right? If you own the place that has the parking lot for the people who work there. You shouldn't be able to juice them more.
Or if you can look at it, if their salary is this, and after they pay for all of their, what they have to pay for, what their salary really looks like, and then you're looking at a professional, somebody that I never forget being in New York when I worked with CUNY, and standing outside and doing and asking people on the street just questions, and I never forget somebody who was studying abroad, and we were asking about the $15 wage. How do you feel about the $15 wage? And this person said, I don't understand a 50 what did he say? A living wage. He said you should have a wage, you should have a wage that you should be able to pay for everything, and that it just didn't make sense how we, I guess how we negotiate things because it's we're going to raise. It was like at $6 and $7 for so long, trying to bring it up to 15.
Oh,
That
I know.
even at 15, that's not even a living wage because no, you can't. Nobody can possibly in most of these towns that they work in with their wages that they make, they can't even live there. So
So the
therefore,
problem becomes that these are millionaires making decisions for us.
right.
That's where the problem is. If you look at so the big scam for our problem here is they're saying we're among the highest paid nurses in New Jersey based on whatever records they could find. Okay, first of all, it's not true, but we do have the sickest patients in the state. But why can't we discuss that there are the highest paid administrators in the state? Like, you're a couple of $16 million. There's no $16 million in front of my salary. I promise you.
Time out. Hold up. Stop. Okay, so it seems like some of these things are just like, it gets worse as it goes on. Are you saying is that an exaggeration or hyperbole?
No, it's not an exaggeration. That's a published fact.
Wait. So administrators in your building, $16 million, and you can't get free parking?
Now you sound like Dr. Evil. You sound like Dr.
The
Evil.
worst thing is that administrator that's making $16 million has free parking. I'm sure they don't pay for their parking.
And there's even around hospitals that you will see that doctors will have an apartment near the hospital so they can be near the hospital for the shift that they work, but that's not where they live. Their homes may be elsewhere. So they have an apartment plus a house, so they just have an apartment be near the hospital when they work, and then they go to their home when they're not working.
But
there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that here. We just found out that there's over 40 executive people that get car service.
Is that paid for? That's paid for, right?
Yeah.
So they pay for a car service for administrators, but they can't give you free parking?
Yeah.
Like.
And it's not just nurses that pay for free parking. People who make less money than nurses, nursing assistants, housekeepers, they take it out of everybody's paycheck. It's disgusting.
Horrible. Like they are nickeling and diming their lowest paid workers. And that's why I was like the lowest paid workers and the nurses all in the same boat, right? Because they're treating you, they're nickel and diming all of you.
Yes, 100%.
And they're getting like $16 million, and they
can't even say it.
Staff ratio, like as in you're like because you're not even. I mean, y'all for just general purposes be like, give us free parking and more and better benefits that we can go. Like that has to be there somewhere because like what you're asking for in terms of staffing ratios for everybody, right? So that you don't burn out, so patients don't die, so you don't go to jail.
Yes. But they're spinning it for a narrative that we're greedy, that right now it's business as usual in the hospital, that they don't need us. They've been sending out these propaganda emails. Well, we took out an ad on one of those planes that over the shore because we're just sick of it. Like, ask Governor Murphy to chime in on this negotiation. Like, he stepped in for Rutgers. Why isn't he stepping in to help nurses?
Right.
And the hospital wrote a propaganda that said if the union really cared about its workers, they would take some of that plane money and, pay their health insurance this month or some shit like that. And then we had nurses give real testimonials, very personal, traumatic, personal stories about their experiences with unsafe staffing, and the hospital called them out in an email to everybody that went to everybody by name, humiliating them.
Wow. So and it's interesting because, like, I think that what is going on right now, like the $16 million for an administrator, and you can't have safe staffing. $16 million
Well,
for an administrator.
I think it's also worth mentioning that when the strike happened, they spent $22 million on replacement nurses. So like what could that $22 million been put to avoid a strike, to hire more nurses in the hospitals, and to lower the patient ratios, right? I mean, they made a decision when they did that. They said it was more important to spend $22 million on replacement nurses in order to break this union. That was just the first wave. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and I think it's important to. Yeah, but these attacks are on working class jobs. I mean, you know it when it comes to social work, teachers, nurses. Those are jobs that working class people aspire to get in order to be able to make it in this country, right? It's like that's why they're some of the most vilified, underpaid, understaffed, under-resourced professions. Are all ones that, like, I know all of us probably have family members who were able to make it up by getting public sector jobs or getting nursing, getting teaching jobs, and it's also very feminized labor, right? There's a reason why it's an attack specifically on these nurses. It's to break their union.
Now, on this, Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital is both private and public, but that means that the public is somehow footing part of this bill for his $16 million salary. And these are public decisions that are being made. Like, are these private decisions, public decisions, or both?
I really don't know. I think everything's dirty. It's like, to me, it's like it's such dirty. So that $16 million guy, he no longer works. He retired, but now he's on PSC&G's board for whatever $1 million no effort job he's doing now. It's just like pass the millionaire jobs to each other, their friends. Like Jacob was saying, when you start lining up these lineups, there's a lot of the same players in all these little circles.
And just the fact that they can pay somebody $16 million and not give free parking, and like take money out of your salary for make you go to them for your pharmaceuticals, right? Or get a kickback on pharmaceuticals, right? Like or something of that nature, forcing you to you could only get medical care at a facility that they own.
Yeah.
Or you're like it's just unfathomable that these levels of conditions are there in such force, and all you're really asking for is, can we have safe levels of staffing so I don't go to jail? I'm just trying to avoid jail. I'm just trying to avoid prison time in terms of somebody getting hurt on my watch. Can I just not go to jail? Can I just have like some safe staffing so I can do my job, drink some water, right? Go to the bathroom, take a sick day, and not go to jail?
Yeah. That's asking too much. We're greedy.
Wow. And you know the stories that you don't hear. I can remember at the height of COVID and hearing about the work, what the nurses or doctors, that it was just so much to see that people were taking their own lives, that it was very overwhelming. And this is a thankless job, but it's a profession where you're taking care of our community, to see that our community is healthy, and the numbers aren't even based on that. I mean, I would love to see what they're basing on their offers when they come to the table, when they're doing these percentages, because like I said, they're definitely not living wages, and and it's simply minimum wages, but it's like throwing numbers out of the air. What are you basing on? In Essex County, um a house costs, and when you're looking at house, gas, groceries, all at the things that you need so that you can come to work healthy, all of these things are going up, and your the level of your pay is not even nowhere near the way they have increased over the last couple of years. I walked into to shop right and to see eggs at one point were $6 and some
Oh,
change.
I know.
It was
Yeah.
like what's going on? It's
Yeah, you
ridiculous.
can't have bacon and eggs on the same day. That's
In the
living too
same week.
large.
In the
Yeah,
same
that's living
week.
too large.
Jonathan, you're on mute. Mute, Jonathan. You're muted.
We're reaching the end of this segment, and we are. There's an action that's going on, and there's some next steps. What are those actions?
But
And
Jonathan,
what's going on now?
Chris has been, why you've been so quiet, Chris? And you've been, I
Oh, that's
just see
true.
here, and you've had so many questions. John, can you give him 2 or 3 minutes? Because he's like, I got a question. Then on solidarity, and then early on, he had a question when the educator was on. Can we give Chris 2 minutes?
All right,
Just
Chris, go on. Go on.
No, I'm just thinking about the question of like solidarity and in terms of connecting the questions of the fact that anyone that works in a social service that like actually like genuinely cares about people tends to get really mistreated, and the fact that these actions by the state that start to work with companies that really undermine the entire purpose of what we work for. I work in education along with TJ. And just thinking on that and thinking on how pretty much people who make their lives about serving wellness to people are not prioritized. Currently, I've been involved with actions in Jersey City around a young black man who was murdered by the Jersey City Police Department
Ugh.
after a mental health hotline was called on him, and the SWAT actually showed up and actually murdered him after an hour of negotiation, and mental health professionals never showed up. And showing how much that the state actually prioritizes repression over wellness. The fact that you have something like Cop City being built in Atlanta, and people who resist that are persecuted. People who actually build around people's needs and conditions are literally punished for that. And listening to the stories of like even how you're rallying around conditions of nurses, and I know several people who work in healthcare in my own life. How you're punished for that. Like the question of solidarity and people like rallying around the fact that there are needs that people need to have met that are not being met by the state, and the fact that we need to also defend each other when actions are taken to repress these kinds of movements. And I think my thoughts kind of align with that, and I don't know if anyone can talk to that as well.
Well, we're gonna be switching to the next segment soon, and you're gonna be in that. And I did want to go in more into Cop City and a lot of the current events that we're talking about. I just want to make sure that the people that we have on this segment who are here for the medical segment, if they have anything to say to close that off before we get into that because Chris, you're going to be in the next segment. TJ Whitaker, you're in the next segment. So we can have that more robust conversation there. I just want to make sure, are we closing up? What are the next steps for this, the conversation about the nurses' strike?
Yeah, if I could just quickly jump in. I think it's really important if folks can come out tomorrow at 5:00 in Maplewood. It's going to be a rally in the march, and Jacob and Carol can talk more about it. But I mean, for teachers, when we first learned about this, and everybody's talked about if there is a profession, right, that's overworked, underappreciated, like we can definitely feel some of that. But I don't know if I've been more personally outraged than when I heard what these nurses are going through with the conditions and then even the stuff that I learned today. Like I didn't know about the parking and the mandated insurance, but just the staffing levels, right? And the millions and scores of millions of dollars that RWJ Barnabas has poured into, kind of holding off of these nurses. We have to come out and who knows if Mark Manigan is going to be home or not tomorrow, but the Maplewood community needs to know that people, right? Nurses, teachers, railroad, bus driver, whoever we are, we need to come out and support these folks. This cannot continue because if they come for the nurses today, right? They come for the nurses today, right? When our contract is up in June and we're looking for solidarity, the nurses might not be there to come out in solidarity. So if only for self-preservation, but for hopefully in solidarity with the nurses, please try to come out tomorrow at 5. All power to the people.
And come out where? Where is this? Can you give us like the specific location, where people are supposed to gather?
Yeah. So So we are meeting at Memorial Park in Maplewood at 5 o'clock. We're gonna have some testimonies. Larry Hamm Chairman Larry from the People's Organization Progress will be out there. And we're going to do a short march up to Manigan's house. And at the end of the day, what that's about is when 1,700 nurses go on strike, when that affects, untold number of patients, it affects, nurses in other hospitals, all of our communities. The people who make those decisions, the people who decide to spend $22 million on replacement nurses and not $22 million to hire more full-time nurses, the ones that decide, all of these things, they don't feel the pressure. You know what I mean? They can take away the healthcare of 1,700 nurses, 1,400 of them who are women, in one of the most diverse workforces of any industry. They don't feel the pressure and the lived experiences that we do. It's working class people who feel that pressure. And this is about bringing the strike to our community in Maplewood and say that we're not going to stand for it and we're going to fight together. And we're going to stand up together. And that was one of the things, TJ, I just want to say TJ and I, we go way back working on anti-police brutality, a lot of abolitionist organizing. These things are connected. These are the struggles that we organize together. And then when it's time to stand up, when we get involved in nurses, it's like, I know who I'm going to call on. I'm going to call TJ. He's going to get me in front of the teachers union, and we're going to invite every teacher in Maplewood to be there, and they're going to come out because we're always in this kind of struggle together, right? And it's kind of beautiful. What's happening in Maplewood is, hundreds of nurses are coming up from Robert Wood Johnson, but we got dozens of nurses coming from Clara Moss, who are also in a contract campaign. We got hundreds of teachers coming out. It is because we understand, it's like, as TJ just said it, they come for nurses today, teachers tomorrow, social workers the next day. So 5 o'clock, Maplewood Memorial Park. We're gonna have some testimonies and a march. And this is really about the average person marching on millionaires. And when we don't see that very much, and I'm really excited for it.
Okay.
Now, just real quick, TJ, you're in a unique position with the Freedom Schools, and you're working with the young students. Do you get to talk about these issues and let them understand from a child's perspective as to what's going on? Like some of their mothers might be nurses, and do y'all talk about that?
It's interesting that you asked that, Donald, because Jacob's wife, Stephanie, teaches at Columbia High School with me. And although yesterday was our first day of school, today was our second, both of us are giving our students like extra credit to come out to the march tomorrow, right? And so we told our students about it. We invited them out. And again, that very same question. So we gave the numbers, right? 1,700 nurses, mostly women. A lot of Black women, right? And so we talked about the impact that has on our families, right? On our communities. Talked about, had them think a little bit about what it was like during COVID, right? If they lost anyone, if they had folks go to the hospital, and how valuable nurses were. So we'll see. Hopefully some young folks will come out. Again, it was just the second day of school. But yeah, we did have those conversations.
Okay. Good.
And so we're going to transition to the next part. Donna, do you want to ask that question for Carol and for Jacob?
Yes, I do. TJ and Chris, you've had this question asked you because you've been here many times. But for Carol and Jacob, this is a hip hop political show. So we had the whole discussion to discuss, the political things that are going on in the community. But we need to know, do you have a hip hop artist, individual, or group that you listen to when you have to get out here and do this work, say a speech, talk to somebody? Is there somebody that you put on to
Carol was just
inspire
talking about
you before you
Carol, come on, Carol.
before you get out there and do that speech? And Carol, we're gonna start with you.
So we were waiting for speakers to come, and nobody ever asks me to DJ. So they said, Carol, just go to your Spotify, get something. So I'm like, okay, I got to get this crowd amped up. I got to get everybody rallied up. So I was like, okay, fight the power that be. I'm like, okay. I put Isley Brothers on and Public Enemy.
Okay.
Nice. PE.
And the response of the crowd was,
I enjoyed it.
okay.
and Jacob.
A lot of Bring the Ruckus on the way to a protest. You gotta listen to Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah.
And then anytime I really want to feel like a badass, I gotta listen to Pusha T. It's not conscious at all, but it's like Pusha T will just make you feel like you're tough,
Our co-host Chris Randall would would appreciate that. That's his favorite all time. All right, thank you so much. We have to have you back on, both of you. We have to have you back on about what's going on with the nurses' strike, continuing to update us, and also with the other projects that you're working on, Jacob. So thank you for being on All Politics Local.
And most of all, don't feel as though, if something is hot and you need to get the word out, please make the call and just say, I need the floor, I need the panel, I got to get the word out, and just let us know.
Thank you so much for being so willing to showcase this fight. I literally feel that we have to stop looking at us as the ones without the power. We have people power. We have numbers.
That's right.
With a very shared interest. People will try to tell us we're more different. We're more alike. We want to just help our families. We just want to eke out a living. We just want to go to work. We just want to come home and enjoy our families. We're not asking for the billionaire salary. We literally just want to exist. And we keep forgetting that we're the powerful ones, that together we can vote people out who don't belong there anymore.
That's right.
We can commune with each other. We can gather with each other and fight these entities. Is it an uphill battle? It sure is. Are we going to get scrapes and bumps along the way? We sure are. But guess what? If we stick together and we keep fighting, I really believe we're going to topple this. I do.
Yeah, and Carol, to that point,
we need to move to because DJ Ronald,
and we're moving real quick. But to that point, and taking over boards and stuff, strategy and strategic planning is everything, and it can be done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care. So we definitely wanted TJ Whitaker, Chris, Donna. There are a lot of things that are going on. One of the things I wanted you to specifically talk about was Cop City. Like, a lot of people don't know what's going on with that, and the protest in Atlanta and what the prosecutors doing to it seems like to criminalize protest and call protest terrorism. Talk to me about that. What are the stakes? Chris, I know you've talked about this a lot, or at least I've seen a lot of posts that you've been into, like, talking about this. I think we had a brief conversation before. What is this issue? Because a lot of people just don't even know it.
Yeah, I mean, so there's, well, thank you for having me on tonight. But there's obviously people who have been organizing against this plan for Cop City for quite some time now. And very recently, 61 organizers have been hit with RICO charges, so charges around corruption, embezzlement, and things like that, that actually date back to records that they've been keeping on people since the George Floyd protests, at least. So they've been keeping records on people for 3 years who have been involved in organizing in the Atlanta area, and have put that on them, in this recent Cop City protest. And they associate them with terrorism because they associate them with a movement that pretty much is advocated, some people have taken direct actions to stop the construction of Cop City. So anyone associated with that in the most
and when you say
way,
direct action, you mean vandalism, right? Like, you're not talking about them blowing up people. You're talking about they've engaged in certain types of vandalism.
Yeah, or just the rendering of certain construction materials just unable to function. So not harming anyone personally, but harming property.
Property damage, right?
Yeah, property damage.
If they mess with cement, they mess with other things that are clearly there.
Tractor,
they cause people.
They block a tractor from moving, and then that's charged with terrorism. And this is
when
not.
They should just be. They could be sued, right? They could be hey, this is a tort thing, not terrorism, or something along those lines, or might be charged with vandalism, but they're being charged under RICO. What does that mean?
Well, if we look back, someone who is an elder of the Black Liberation Army, Mutulu Shakur, who recently passed and who's having memorial services now, was charged with RICO charges for his involvement, in basically helping the Black Liberation Army. So while they could not charge him with any kind of crime that directly involved harming anybody, they involved him in any type of crime that was related to struggle against basically against the repression of liberation movements. And so we also see that with black movements in places like Atlanta. We see since the Ferguson protests, in 2014, 2015, the repression and targeting of activists of my generation since then. Josh Williams is still a political prisoner from that time. And so with the growth of organizations, particularly in the South, you see places like Cop City being built. And so when people try to resist that and try to resist that repression, then you see terrorism charges. And this is not dissimilar from places like, Palestine, or even where my parents are from in Chile. They've charged indigenous people with resisting, repression, and charged them with terrorism charges. And so they put, state terrorist charges on people who are simply, resisting companies building on their land. And this has been actually a constant of U.S. policy, worldwide, and now it's coming back home to the United States.
And when you say, and again, just for the audience, and TJ Whitaker, you can join in, when you're saying that they're using strategies they used to use abroad at home, can you break that down? What does that mean? What are the strategies they used abroad, and how is that being brought home? What do you mean with that?
So, for example, in places like Palestine and places like Chile, particularly indigenous people have been criminalized for any type of action that resists corporations building on indigenous land, supported by state law. And so we talked about previously the collaboration between companies and state law, and the fact that companies have a lot of weigh in on what kind of laws get passed and what gets enforced by states, particularly capitalist states. In Chile, this has a very long history. We're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the U.S.-backed military coup on September the 11th, where the United States overthrew the government of Salvador Allende. And now the government of Chile is still reeling from those consequences, and the laws are based around that. And so you see these kinds of experiments happening in other countries, almost in a way that, it's almost, it is an experiment to happen in other countries in order for it to be brought back home. So you
So
see
when people
people
are
getting
talking
charged with
about,
terrorism there, and then you see that being brought back to activists here.
so that when people are talking about, like, in all these foreign policy establishment, they talk about the international rise of authoritarianism and how authoritarianism can be brought here, but they only really talk about Trump, right? And they talk about 1/6, and they talk about the attempt to, like, overthrow the election. You're talking about something that seems to be a lot more layered, detailed, ingrained in policies that, whether Trump runs for president or not, doesn't matter. What you're saying is these tactics are being used on a local level, and this authoritarian type tactic it's baked in. And TJ Whitaker, you join in on this as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw, like, in addition to what Chris is saying, like we know, for example, that for years and years and years, like the New York City police would be, training the Israeli police, basically internationalizing the repression, that we have here. And then for me, I always understood the RICO, charges best in comparison to, like, it's first being used against the mafia, right? And so when the state wanted to go after, right, the Panthers and other organizations in the 60s, right, they used some of those, right, again, those RICO charges, right, to go out. And so it allowed them to go after, right, entire organizations, using, again, some of the tactics that we know now, COINTELPRO legal and illegal. And again, it criminalizes, right, literally in entire organizations for doing, freedom work. But
and that's because is that because in RICO statutes, you don't have to, you just need to be associated with people
exactly
who are committing the crime. You don't have to be a criminal yourself.
Exactly.
You're just aiding in the organization.
Yep.
Apply that to political movements. That means you could find one bad actor in a political movement and then tie everyone else into it. As in, if one person steals a car, one person does something else. And does this become even more heightened or more problematic when you understand, like when COINTELPRO often had agent provocateurs, as in the state literally could plant people in movements, have them either encourage or commit certain acts, and then charge everyone who was a member of that organization with criminal RICO activity? Is that something? Is it just far-fetched? Am I just making stuff up? Like, how does that? Is that? Are those some of your concerns?
I mean, people who even, like, are framed with charges, like even people who are not agent provocateurs, but people who are framed with charges, like Mumia Abu Jamal, people like Huey Newton, who are framed with charges by the state, could also, anyone associated with Huey Newton or Mumia could be then charged with anything. So, like, people were arrested, decades later for being associated with Assad Shakur. So.
Yeah.
You said people were arrested decades later for being associated with Assad Shakur. Can you explain?
Kamal Siddiqui, who's currently a political prisoner, was associated with Assad Shakur, and the state actually wanted him to confess to being associated with her release, her liberation, rather. And because he didn't admit to that, they have kept him in prison since 2001, I believe. I'm
wow.
I can be corrected on that, but he was also associated with terrorism charges, and especially in the wake of 9/11. So even, like, decades later, they've still pursued people who are in the Black Panther Party or Black Liberation Army, even after those organizations have not actually functionally existed, because they've been associated with people.
And even more directly to the point I think you were making is that they are not charged with any type of activity that is related to actual terrorism. Like, they're not being charged with killing anyone. They're not being charged with blowing stuff up. They're not being charged with, like, building a bomb. Like, they're literally being charged with, you knew this person who we associated with a crime.
Is that what we would call conspiracy? like they're because you can be charged the same charge just based on with the conspiracy charge. Is that something similar to that? Chris?
Chris or
Uh,
TJ Whitaker?
I can't speak to that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I'll say I
'Cause
thought TJ more of the legal.
yeah, yeah, I can remember a young lady back in college days in Hampton and how she really never
Yeah.
yeah, and her charge was conspiracy, and then Clinton um uh she's traveling now talking about how she was charged with conspiracy and she never did a crime, and she had I believe she had a child in jail, but oh my gosh, I can't think of her name, but she went to Hampton University and she was involved with a young man who was a drug dealer, and her crime was being with him.
Yeah, I do remember that case. Now that you mentioned, I don't remember the specific name, but I remember the case. Yeah.
Yeah, she was. I know when she one of the first places she came when she was released was Essex County College, and but she's very open to come and talk about her story and tell how close when you're, you know, and whether you're helping people or just a part of in some form or fashion, but you're not actually the actor, and how you can be charged. So it's something, we should have. I know we have occasionally we have our attorney come on and he talks. Sometimes we haven't had him on in a while. That'll be a good question for him.
That's also the thing with, like, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. You were saying.
No, I was gonna say, like, that's also a thing, like the larger issue is the criminalization of people's movements. I mean, the thing is, like, whether they are people who take active confrontation with the state in defense of movements that are associated with the people, like the Black Panther Party, or the Young Lords, or the American Indian Movement, who actually have a right to this land that was occupied by the United States government. Whether that is violent or nonviolent, all these movements have been criminalized, regardless. And so we have some of the most peaceful movements, that are taking peaceful resistance tactics, like in places like Cop, and the actions against Cop City in Atlanta. We see the nurses strike having repressive, actions taken against them, taking away their health care and things like that, simply for building people's movements. And so the key issue is, whether these are political prisoners or prisoners of war, these are people who are advocates of community-based solutions for the people. And they're criminalized because of that. And the state finds ways to criminalize them, regardless.
And one could say, and there has been, talk, chatter in the back that all came about with Bill Cosby when he was talking about buying one of the networks, and then all of a sudden, that was, then everything, came out, and that was something, that was talked about, but you only heard, because it was, if that were the case, they were very successful in what they did.
I probably wouldn't put Bill Cosby in that category.
But no, I'm saying that the what was said is that none of that, it came about once he had started talking about, and I get what you're saying, but it came about because they wanted to just totally take away his character and dismantle everything he had done, because what he was about to do.
I'm just saying I totally disagree with that part. I just like, that's we feel differently,
Okay.
Donna. We feel differently, very differently on that.
Okay.
Like that conspiracy Cosby, that's all you. You
No, that's not all me. I'm just saying that,
I want no parts, Donna. I want no parts, no parts.
You didn't say it. I said it.
I know. That's why I had you on the screen by yourself. Oh, no parts of that. No.
Yeah.
Nope.
On the
I like the show. He like, 1, 2, 3, 100 people probably guilty. But that's just me. I'm good. I think I wouldn't put that with Cop City, right? Like
I'm not trying to put it. I'm talking
just
about
saying.
what people, what ends people will go to go so far as to, the issue is here, but to take away your credibility and dismantle, and like now, but and how ironic it is that you have this figure now who's been president, who's what, on his fourth indictment, and so it's amazing. I don't know if you say if his money can do it, um popularity could do it, but it's different rules for different, for different people. It's, I don't know.
Jonathan, if
Yeah.
I could just jump in, I want to just get back to the Cop City thing for a minute. In the Maps of Freedom School, in our chat group, in the last few days, we've been talking about possibly having some type of public program. One, because a lot of folks, a lot of activist folks are aware of what's going on with Cop City, but there's a lot of folks walking around who quite frankly don't know, right? That is happening. That the millions, the hundreds of millions of dollars that are going into Korea. I mean, Cop City, and like the literal amount of land space, the amount of right technology, the information got, like there's so many like layers to it. But the other part of it, I think that people need to really like hone in on. Like, this is being signed on to by Black politicians, right? This is being signed on to by Black businessmen, right? And Black business leaders. And so there's some conversations we have to have, because when this thing, it's not just going to stay in the South, right? And in Atlanta. Right. And when it starts to move around the country, it's going to be people that look like us in a lot of instances that are signing off on this, man. And so,
which happened in 1994, right? Like, there's historical precedent for that.
Exactly.
There were many activists in 1994 who were like, no, don't do it. This is wrong. And that was directly seen as causing, as hypercharging the prison industrial complex. I know Wrangell, many Black mayors were actually for that because they were scared of crack, right? Like,
Right.
And I get in 94 why people were so scared of crack. Get it, live through it, understand it.
Yeah.
But we lived through it. We've been through that. One in five Black men, according to the New York Times, 1 in 5 Black men have disappeared from society based on being incarcerated, like socially dead, based on not being able to participate in the system. And then we're talking about militarizing the police in a particular way when there are models in Newark that are different, right? So the question, like there are models in Newark that are non-police, that are public health, to deal with violence, that work. And so to have an approach that says we simply need, because isn't that what Cop City is? They're like, we need to militarize, we need to have a large training ground to, on a large scale, militarized police to deal with actually diminishing violence nationally when you look at it over 20 years, right? Is that really what the fear of Cop City? It is a training ground where you will pump out and spend money and invest in a form of public safety that has been proven to be detrimental to Black people.
And how much equipment has already been sold to municipalities, from military, organizations that they have already, that it's happening so, like, right under our noses, and we don't, I don't know. It's like everybody's just like, okay.
So I was gonna, we're running out of time. I was gonna ask a question about, like, given this stuff that happens, does voting matter, right? Because it seems like, because I'm asking this, and it's just a devil's advocate question. You have a Democratic governor, and we have the nurses that are getting spit on, right? For basic reasons. Like that situation is just egregious. $16 million, and they can't get free parking, and they're only asking to not go to jail for understaffing. Like, their demands are far more reasonable than the conditions that they work under. You're looking at Cop City, it's Atlanta, right? Like the fact that it's going forward in Atlanta, and there's so many Black politicians and police. Like, if the Black community wanted to shut it down, they could shut it down. It seems like that's the case, but they're not, right? Like, so is there a thing of this multicultural anti-Blackness where they just got people in place? Like, what does it matter? And maybe that's a way to end off, right? Like, does voting matter? Does this organizing matter? Given just even those two things we've been talking about.
Organizing matters, voting matters, because it's little by little. You look at now, you have a Supreme Court that nobody would have thought would have possibly been where it is today. Voting matters because you can get a person in office who, and you know, I wanted to talk about it earlier, the tax laws that he changed when he like the first year he got in, that the long-term tax laws were more for the wealthy, but the short-term tax laws that were like immediate income, but they will only last for 5 years. Yes, voting matters, and when you put dangle these things that seem like they're big gains, but they're not, because they're only temporary gains. And you have people in office, and everything that he was able to accomplish in those 4 years, and not so much even him, it was the people who put him there to make sure that these things that they've been wanting to do. And Congressman Payne has said it for years. How long have they been working on dismantling abortion law? And here we are.
And because I know what I feel about it. I know, Nana, I know like what our answers would be. Chris, TJ Whitaker, I know that you guys organize a lot. How would you respond to that?
TJ, you want to go first, or you?
Sure. I think that voting can be a tactic, but not a strategy. And the reason why I say that is I think that too often we or our people, we see voting as an end all be all, right? They'll go to the polls, and then after they cast their vote, like, and I really feel strongly about this, for example, with the last presidential election, people were on some anybody but Trump stuff. Right. They went and cast their vote for Trump for the most part, and then left Biden, in my opinion, like to his own devices. And I feel like we Black people, progressives, whatever, can't be beholden to the Democratic Party, right? They take us for granted. They take our vote for granted. We give them the vote, and then nothing really changes. So again, voting as a tactic, but we have to be committed to the long game of organizing, the long game of being in the street, the long game of potentially being disruptive if we need to around certain issues, but not just being, okay, I voted, like I'm good, like or voting, my ancestors died for me, like, okay, I get it, but just voting has proven we can look back over the number of Black faces in high places. Just voting and putting Black folks in office has not gotten us freedom, right? So it can be one thing that we do or a tactic, but that can't be the entire strategy.
Yeah, I think that, in large part, I agree with my comrade TJ, just because of the fact that I'm sorry, my cat is.
That's a big cat. He's like,
but I think that the purpose of organizing is to organize people around power for themselves, and voting should be an extension of reflecting people's power, and not any other sense of that. If we know that our people who are going to run in New Jersey are mostly going to be Democrats, so they're going to be beholden to a Democratic Party that is not representative of people's organizations in any way, shape, or form. So what they're doing that might benefit people are in spite of the fact that they are, running in these circles. It's largely just because they have the monopoly. Republicans and Democrats have a monopoly over politics. The purpose of organization is not simply to get people to vote. It is to gain resources for people whether it is through a voter having someone in a city council office or otherwise. It's not, it's by it's by actions on all fronts. It's not just one way or the other. The organization is supposed to be sustained and not just this temporary act of voting. I think that the fact that we do place so much emphasis on voting makes it seem like we can elect people who have funded Cop City in Atlanta, who have funded the police in the wake of the protests in St. Louis and Ferguson, around Michael Brown, and people like that, and think that we have done some kind of political action on behalf of Black, Latino, Asian, Arab people, and think that we've done something for the masses of people, and we honestly haven't. We have lost gains along the way, in terms of healthcare, in terms of education, and I'm sorry, this cat is really
That's that cat. I think that cat is like, y'all better vote with Don. But you know what, Chris and TJ?
That cat is like me. It's like, it's time to go.
It's time to go.
That cat at my time. I gotta see. Can you pick the cat? I love cats. Pick that cat up so I can see the cat.
We'll let you end us out.
Chris, let me see that cat. TJ and Chris.
So as he's getting the cat down, you could end us out.
I am. I do. You guys are doing. I need you to get the cat, Chris. I need to see the cat. I want you to take us out by letting us know what music when you're doing the work that you're continuously doing, because you guys are doing work steadily, and people don't even know the work that you're doing. You're doing it, I almost want to say silently, but you're moving. So can you tell us, and we have to get you to come back real soon so that we can talk more on voting and organizing specifically. But let's talk, Chris. What are you listening to?
Honestly, today was the first day that I had I work in a middle school, and the students just came back yesterday, and I spent today with them, and for some reason they're playing J. Cole.
Okay,
that's been on my mind for the last afternoon, so I'm gonna go with J. Cole tonight.
And TJ,
you know what? If I could. I want to give a shout out to one of my comrades, Hakeem Green.
Yeah.
Channel Live. He was in town last week. I think this year was the 11th anniversary of 24 Hours for Peace top concert. So last weekend he was in town. The concert, was great. And I just want to shout out my man Hakeem. His commitment to Newark and East Orange, his commitment to hip hop, and keeping hip hop whole, I'll just say that, for lack of a better phrase. Again, shouting my brother out, man. Appreciate your work, love you, and what you and brother Ras are trying to do as far as this anti-violence thing in Newark. So shout out to my man Hakeem Green.
Thank you for that. Was that Principal Guffelli that just did the same shout out?
Well, I mean, Hakeem Green is a regular on our show.
No, but I'm saying, but based on his 24, I think Principal Guffelli. But thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. Because, yes, absolutely. Yes. We're always honored to have him here. We call him Newark's ambassador to hip hop.
Right.
Right. All right. So, Donna, last word. Take us out.
Well, I just want to thank you. Thank you for being here and for having what you would be not the popular decision, but just popular point of views, but something that would leave us all thinking and saying, And thank you for that. And TJ, if you can hang out for a little bit longer, I need you to do that. Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And shout out to DJ Rhino. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, DJ Rhino.
Happy born day, DJ Rhino.
All right. Take care. Until next week.
All right.
Thank you.